There we go. Thank you. Whoever did that. You can't hear? I can hear. I can hear me now.
We're on the big mic.
We're good. Once again, welcome to the April 4th Finance and Audit Committee meeting. I will call the special meeting of the Finance Audit to order. Introduction of late items, Ms. Gurry.
Thank you, Chair. There is no late items this morning.
Thank you. Motion to adopt the agenda, please. Moved by Mayor McKay, seconded by Councillor Hong. Any changes or admissions? In favor? Carried. Motion to adopt the minutes of March 14th, 2018. Moved by Councillor Armstrong, seconded by Mayor McKay. Any discussion? In favor? Carried. Okay, presentations. 5A, to be introduced by Laura Mercer, Manager of Accounting Services. And it is requested that the Finance and Audit Committee hear anyone wishing to speak with respect to the 2018-22 financial plan. And would that, Ms. Gurry, come before or after the presentation?
After the presentation, Chair.
Thank you very much. I'll turn it over. I'll try to turn it over. Did you hit your thing? Could you please?
Press to speak. There we go.
There you
Good.
go.
Okay. We are here today to present the staff recommended 2018 to 2022 financial plan. Ms. Wendy Fuller will walk you through a PowerPoint presentation that outlines the key budget drivers as well as the changes that have occurred since the provisional budget was passed on January 15th, 2018. So I'll pass it over to Wendy.
Am I on?
You're on.
Okay. So as Laura said, we would like to walk you through the 2018-2022 financial plan that we are recommending Council approve. I have provided you with a PowerPoint handout so that you can follow along and jot down any notes as you go. So to review what has happened year to date, in October and November in 2017, you had in-camera meetings where you reviewed the budget department by department. Then on November 27th at the Committee of the Whole meeting, the draft financial plan was presented. On December 4th, we had our e-town hall for public input. And on January 15th, 2018, you adopted the 2018-2022 financial plan bylaw, which we call the Provisional 5-Year Plan. So the 2018-2022 financial plan does include a number of strategic priorities and initiatives of Council. Related to your strategic plan update that you did, there's projects including the Georgia Greenway construction, the waterfront walkway development, projects for the Port Drive and South Downtown Nanaimo waterfront. Initiatives included are property acquisition and affordable housing and poverty reduction. There's stuff from the core review in the financial plan, including the purchase of a milling machine this year, which was also supported by a business case developed by staff. We're looking at an old city quarter parking strategy this year, and we have 2 user fee reviews. Last year we started the general user fee review, which will wrap up this year, and this year we'll look at a water and sewer user fee review. The financial plan also includes a number of sustainability projects. The most significant one is our LED streetlight conversion project, which was supported by a business case, and phase 1 of this project will occur in 2018. Some of the other things I'd like to highlight, as part of the financial planning process, staff developed over 16 business cases for either new projects or changes in service levels. Not all of those business cases were included in the financial plan, but that work was all done. Some of the business cases included that haven't been highlighted in this slide include water hauler stations, an energy step code program, an infrastructure project specialist, the city solicitor, and the manager of treasury and risk management all had business cases. As well, as part of the financial planning process, we do payback analysis for all sustainability projects to ensure they meet our criteria and that we're picking the best projects for the dollars. In addition to the annual contribution to the Housing Legacy, Council has committed close to $500,000 to address health, social, and safety issues this year. This includes downtown, daytime security, additional portable toilets, safe syringe disposal boxes, the shower program, rent supplements, the extreme weather shelter. As well, the daytime drop-in center is in the budget this year and also the next 4 years. The other programs here are just 2018 commitments, but the daytime drop-in center is a 5-year commitment in the budget. So looking at our property taxes and user fees, the current plan before you has a tax increase of 3.18% in 2018, 2.74% in 2019, 1.89% in 2020, and 1.77% in the subsequent years. This includes the 1% annual increase for the General Asset Management Reserve that Council approved extending last April when we presented the 20-year infrastructure plan. The sanitary sewer fees went up 5% this year and will go up 4% the next 4 years. This is for the Asset Management Reserve. And water user fees increased 7.5% this year and in the next 2 years, and will drop to 5% in 2021 when we end the extra 2.5 annual increase for the Water Asset Management Reserve. And sanitation user fees are $165 this year as we finish implementation of automation across the city, and they're anticipated to drop to $150 in the subsequent years. So looking at our property tax history, the past 10 years, the average tax increase was 2.1%, and over this council's term, assuming you approve the final budget before you, the average increase will be 1.4%. You have to keep in mind, in 2013, we implemented the 1% annual increase for asset management, and during the period 2009 to 2014, we did have our phased reduction of industrial tax rates to level them the same as commercial. So what does this all mean for a typical household? An average house in Nanaimo, the taxes will go from 1949 to 2011, an increase of $62. They'll have an increase of approximately $36 for water fees, $6 for sewer fees, and $47 for sanitation, for a total increase of $151. At this time, we don't have the RDN requisition. They're hoping to have it to us next week, which is why we have not included the RDN numbers in our presentation. So the average household pays $2,011 for property taxes. So how do we spend that money? Well, $1,630 goes to city services, $217 goes to reserves, which includes the contribution to the General Asset Management Reserve, $118 goes towards projects, and $46 goes towards debt servicing, and that'd be the Nanaimo Aquatic Center, the Cranberry Fire Hall, and the Conference Center, because the water treatment plant debt is paid from water user fees. Of the $1,630 that goes to city services, it breaks down $547 for police services, $304 for fire, emergency, and 911, $292 for Parks and Rec, $217 for engineering and public works, $108 for general government, which includes council, legislative services, communications, the CAO office, human resources, the city solicitor's office, finance and purchasing, and IT. $105 goes for planning and development services, $22 to the conference center, $19 to economic development, which includes the tourism, so the TVI contract, as well as the tourism center and the downtown Nanaimo grants, and $16 goes to bylaw and parking services. In 2018, our projected revenues are $180 million, which will provide funding for annual operations and maintenance, as well as projects and contributions to infrastructure reserves. As you can see from the pie chart, approximately 58% of our revenue does come from property taxes. The 2018 operating budget is $138 million, and this will be spent for annual operating maintenance to provide day-to-day services to the city. So this does not include any projects. So what are the key budget drivers in 2018? And by key budget drivers, I'm talking about the significant changes to expenditures or revenues that either increased or decreased property taxes over 2017. So I'd like to run through some of those highlights. So expenditure increases include asset management at $1 million, which is our 1%. Operating expenditures include an increase in wages and benefits of approximately $2.4 million. This includes contingency for expired contracts, because as you know, the QP contract expired at the end of 2016. This includes increases for the IAFF. It includes an extra work day in 2018. There's one extra work day. We have the RCMP contract that's gone up approximately $1 million, which includes 3 new officers, and it also includes the change in the budget estimate. We went from 92% to 93% of the contract, which is about a $250,000 increase. We have the 2018 election at 110. We have health, social, and safety issues at 236. Snow and ice. So back in the winter of 2016 and 2017, as you're aware, we had a very harsh winter, which did drain our reserve for snow and ice control. So we are in the process of rebuilding that reserve, and $200,000 of the 2018 budget will go into rebuilding that reserve, so we have it available if we have those kind of snow events again in the future. We also have a software licenses increase of $125,000, and other net changes to materials, contracted services that total $952,000. And then we are in year 2 of our transitioning our Fortis and casino revenue money to the Strategic Infrastructure Reserve, and the impact this year in the reduction of casino revenue that will not be used for general operations is $800,000. We also have some expenditure decreases. Under wages and benefits, of course, the province reduced the MSP premiums in half, which resulted in a savings of $510,000. Our WCB rate is more favorable this year, which reduced WCB budget by $96,000. Our annual debt servicing costs went down $194,000. We were at the end of our 10-year term on our second borrowing for the Port of Nanaimo Centre, as well as the Cranberry Fire Hall, and there were more favorable interest rates for our second 10-year terms, which resulted in a savings. Economic development, $375,000. Last year, we still had budget for the wind-up of the NEDC. Legal fees, a reduction of $195,000, but I should say this is offset by an increase in wages and benefits. So how the city solicitor's office was funded was by reducing legal fees and moving them over. So the city solicitor's office has a net impact of 0 on property taxes. And then we also have project expenditures. So back in 2017, we presented our 20-year plan on infrastructure, and that assumed that we would have $7 million a year from general taxation going to fund projects. That has now dropped to $5.9 million. It was $6.4 in 2017. It's now $5.9 million, which resulted in a project decrease there of $520,000. So we are not meeting the target for our funding for projects that we had projected in the 20-year plan, and that is probably something council should consider incrementally increasing back to $7 million so that we stay on track with our 20-year plan that we presented. We also have some revenue increases. Traffic fine revenues anticipated to be up $100,000. The Nanaimo Aquatic Center is anticipating $177,000 more in revenue, and building permit revenue is anticipated to be up $132,000. So the overall net expenditure increase is approximately $4.5 million. We have increased in property tax revenue due to growth of approximately 1.5, which leads us to need an additional $3 million, or the 3.18% in property tax funding. Now, I'd like to walk you through the changes that have happened since the provisional budget that you adopted in January to the final budget we are presenting today. So the key changes that have occurred are we've added $100,000 for the capital project management framework. This was a recommendation of the Deloitte report that you had presented to you in the fall. We've added $20,000 for the community engagement task force. We've added $30,000 annually for the Nanaimo Art Gallery annual operating grant increase you approved. We've added $336,965 for response to health, social, and safety issues, which you recently approved approved, excuse me, and we have increases in wages and benefits of $224,218, and we've had net savings of $139,000 for a total increase to the budget of approximately $572,000 or 0.59%. We use an estimate for growth when we do the provisional budget, and we now have the final numbers. Growth was $221,000 higher than anticipated, so that leaves a net change of $351,000 or 0.36%. So the provisional tax rate was 2.74%. There was an error in the calculation of the provisional tax rate of 0.08%. With our changes of 0.36, that brings us to our 3.18%. And I just have a little note there again, just mentioning that city solicitor, because it does show in the changes, that was incorporated between provisional and final. The city solicitor's office was not in the provisional budget. It was added for final, but it did not impact property taxes. We'd also like to go through some of the staff change highlights. First, some of the positions that are included in the 2018 budget that were not included in the 2017 budget include an additional buyer, the city solicitor, legislative services clerk, the manager of treasury and risk. We also have a manager of community safety, a major case file specialist, and a major case file supervisor. We've reinstated the position of Director of Engineering and Public Works, and to the facility section, we've added a project technician specialist. Positions that were in the 2017 budget that have been removed for 2018 include an administrative assistant, the Chief Sustainability Officer, the Director of Communications, the Assistant Fire Chief. So with the retirement of Craig Richardson, there was a reorganization of the management structure within Nanaimo Fire Rescue, and an Assistant Fire Chief position was eliminated. The Manager of Bylaw, Regulatory and Security. With the elimination of the gender guarding, that resulted in a net decrease of 2.5 FTEs in prison guards, and the Manager of Construction position was eliminated. So we did want to talk a little bit about the new employer health tax and MSP. So as you know, when the province announced their budget, they have indicated that a new employer health tax of approximately 1.95% will come into effect on January 1st, 2019. Of course, when we did the provisional budget, we knew about the decrease to MSP premiums, but we did not know how the province was replacing it. So in 2017, our budget for MS premiums was approximately $1 million. That has dropped to just over $500,000 in 2018 with the cut to premiums. In 2019, we anticipate the employer health tax will cost us approximately $1.1 million, but we'll also have to pay the 50% MSP premiums. So we're anticipating a cost of $1.6 million. In 2020, when premiums are eliminated, we'll just be paying the employer health tax, which will be approximately equivalent to what we were paying in MSP before the changes. But how does this impact our budget? Well, between provisional and final, this means an increase of approximately $1.1 million in 2019 and approximately $500,000 in the following years. This would have meant a 1% tax increase next year just to cover off the new employer health tax. So we looked at strategies for smoothing out that increase, and we have put $500,000 from this year's surplus aside, and we will use that in 2019 to reduce the impact of the new employer health tax. So that'll reduce the increase in property taxes to 2.57 from 1.06, which it would have been due to that change. Looking at projects, over the next 5 years, we have budgeted $258 million for projects. That includes $90 million in 2018. Keeping in mind the 2018 number does look higher, but it also includes close to $30 million in carry forwards. And this graph just breaks it down by infrastructure type. Some of the key strategic projects include the Georgia Avenue Greenway, which we talked about, waterfront walkway development, the annual contribution to the Housing Legacy Reserve, annual budget for property acquisition, our milling machine, which was tied to the core review, and of course, phase 1 of the LED streetlight conversion. Some of the more significant infrastructure projects include the Boundary Northfield intersection upgrade, which was a carry forward and is currently underway. We have the 6 automated solid waste collection trucks that we ordered last year, scheduled for delivery this spring. We have Fire Station number 1, which was supported by a business case, and currently we're in the alternative approval process for. We have the Chase River Trunk Sanitary Sewer new pump station and twinning of Force Main, and we have the Terminal Trench and Utility Project. So funding for our projects, approximately 42% comes from statutory reserves, with approximately 12% coming from general revenues and user fees. You'll see debt is up over last year because we now have Fire Station 1, which we are funding from debt. So that has increased the debt to 13%. Last year, I believe, was about 4%. Looking at our reserve balances at the end of 2018, we're projected to have $106.5 million in our reserves, and then at the end of 2022, we have $153.1 million. But something to keep in mind, years 4 and 5 of the projects, there's not as much detail for those projects yet, and as those projects move up and we get more refined costs, some of that will be funded from reserves. I also wanted to talk a little bit about debt. So in the provisional budget, we had the Fire Station number 1 borrowing, and I should mention that the borrowing for Fire Station 1, the debt servicing payments will be paid from the General Asset Management Reserve, so they're not directly hitting property taxes. We also had in the provisional budget borrowing for the waterfront walkway, and we also had internal borrowing for 3 sewer DCC projects. So in case you're not familiar with internal borrowing, what we're going to do here is we have sewer DCC projects, but we haven't collected enough sewer DCC money yet because we have our 20-year plan for sewer DCCs, but some projects need to be undertaken now before we've collected all the developer contributions for that. So we are going to borrow from our drainage DCC reserve because the projects are a little later out there, so we have the money available there. We will borrow the funds from there, and the sewer will pay back the drainage with interest for the debt servicing of that. And then as the money is collected for the sewer DCCs, it repays the drainage statutory reserve. We do have a change to debt for final. We've eliminated the borrowing for the waterfront walkway. As council is aware, we were successful in our grant application for the 2017 Strategic Priorities Fund application. So with the $3.8 million grant we received, we were able to eliminate the borrowing for the waterfront walkway. And just one last slide. At the end of 2017, we are at 11.2% of our current debt servicing limit. So next steps, we need to staff needs to calculate and collect the property taxes. To allow us to do this, we need the financial plan adopted by council. Our deadline for doing this is May 15th, so we plan on bringing the financial plan amended bylaw to council on April 23rd for the first 3 readings and for final adoption on May 7th. So if council did wish to make any changes to final, this would be the time to bring those forward, as we do have, you only have 1 council meeting in April, so we have to go for first 3 readings on the 23rd and to meet the provincial requirement of May 15th. Yeah, we only have 2 council meetings.
Thank you very much, ladies. Appreciate it. Important information. Open the floor. Would I open the floor for questions and debate now, or would we invite anyone from the audience to speak to the presentation?
Thank you, Chair. I would have you folks ask questions and talk about this now, and then invite the public up to.
Thank you. I open the floor to questions. If there are any, if you could just hit your buttons, please, and then we'll go in that order. Oh.
You have to hit start queuing.
Start queuing. Start queue session. There we go. Councillor Armstrong.
I just have a question on the traffic fines revenue. My understanding that's supposed to go back into crime reductions activities. That's what the province had said. Is that true? Are we doing that? Where revenue increases, where traffic fines revenue has gone up $100,000? My understanding is all those dollars are supposed to go back into police under the provincial government agreement.
It would fund something. Yeah, it would fund, because we have the RCMP contract, yeah, it would fund.
It's supposed to be it's not supposed to be for services, it's supposed to be for programs. So I'm wondering if those funds could be used for the downtown security issues that we have. Because that's a question I have, because my understanding is we haven't been applying it properly. It did not go back into policing, it went to fire in the previous years. So that's something I would like to clarification on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Armstrong. Good question. Councillor Brennan.
Thank you. The position of in-house counsel, is that position still in there? I thought it had been removed, or was that just delayed, or how did that?
The position was put on hold, but it is still in the budget.
And how much was put in there for that?
So the city solicitor's office, let me just flip it up. The actual office itself has a budget of, for the position and related expenses to the position, you're looking at about $202,000. And then the city solicitor's office also has a budget of $205,000 for external legal services. And then in addition to that, Human Resources Department has a budget of $85,000 for legal related to HR issues. So the total budget for the city is approximately $487,000, including the city solicitor's office, plus budget for external legal services.
Okay. Have we ever seen a sheet that justifies that position or explain?
There was a business case developed for the position, and it was reviewed by senior management, and then the CAO and the CFO made the decision on which business cases were included in the financial plan.
But council hasn't seen that.
Sorry, I was not included in the October and November meetings, so.
Okay. All right, so then I guess I'll just put you on notice that I will make a motion to remove that entirely from the budget. And if we want to see a business case, we can do that next year.
If you're going to make a motion like that, could I recommend that you ask the funds to then be put back to legal expenses so that we don't reduce the city's overall legal budget? Because if we remove the position and don't put the money back into legal expenses, your legal budget will be very low for 2018 and not comparable to prior years.
Okay, thank you. And one last question. You did tell us what the budget line was for legal, and
So the entire budget for legal, including the city solicitor's office, is $486,500. I said 487, I rounded up, but
right.
if you want to be exact, $486,500.
Okay, and is that less or more than last year?
I can tell you. Right here. Less. It's less than last year.
And how much was last year?
523.
That's significantly different than what's being floated around in the media, and I'm
Well,
wondering.
I believe in the media, they're talking actuals, not budget. We were significantly over budget in 2017.
Okay, and so when we get our audit, that will show that overage, will it?
It will be included in all of those, the numbers in the financial statements.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
No, but just wondering when you want me to make that motion, at the very end after the public has spoken, or when would it be best?
I think that the conclusion of if anybody comes from a member of the public, and then when we decide what we're going to send to council from this meeting, that will be the appropriate time to debate
Okay, thank you.
any changes. Councilor Yocum.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Before I get to my questions, just in quickly in regards to the city solicitor, before I make a vote on anything, I prefer, like yourself, the business plan, because some of them may make sense, and some of them may be warranted considering how some of the what I hear in the, out there that our legal expenses are at, maybe some of that could have been in-house, so if, I'd like to make a voting decision on actually the subject and not who actually, I'm not saying it's you guys, but who actually brought it to the table. It might be actually a good idea, minus who actually brought it to the table, why some people will vote against it most likely. And, I'd like to discuss that, and then obviously not today, but we, all have this on the list, and there'll be some merit to it, because some of that legal expenses could be done in-house, that drives whatever, I think we're at, whatever I read somewhere, 700 or something thousand. Whatever it is I just said, so, we will discuss that when we get to that subject, so I'd like to, we're looking forward to information, don't want to just make a blind decision out through spite, at this table. Secondly, the question I have, there's also been a lot of rhetoric out there that this council has done nothing but eliminated jobs galore. I'm really pleased that actually, it works out, it looks like it says 9 and 9. Now, they all haven't been filled, I just heard you say that. So, there were 7 jobs, which 9 included FTE, so actually, so we're actually about on page, your slide staff changes highlight. So for Diamond, would you say it's pretty well even, ballpark?
In your budget book on the second page, the total FTEs are actually slightly up. And in 2017, our total FTEs were 747.1, and in 2018, they're 749.9.
Great, so yeah, so that clears some of the rhetoric out there that there's, we're chopping and cutting jobs and there's no staff here, et cetera, so I'm really pleased to see that, thank you. That was first I've seen it as well, thank you. Really didn't have a question.
Thank you. Next in queue, Councillor Hong.
Thank you. Are we just referring to your presentation, or can we actually go by our agenda?
Yeah, you can ask questions about budget.
Great. I have some concerns again with, similar to what Councillor Brennan has, but we'll have that discussion later. The ones that I do have on page 53 of our agenda, core review, doesn't seem like it's gonna happen. So I like that scrapped.
Sorry, Councilor Hong, there is no core review plan for 2018 in the budget.
But it says that on page 53. 53 on our agenda. For $568,000 and change. Or 48 on your package. Or 48 on your thing, but 53 on our whole binder.
No, what this page is showing is how projects in the plan tie to different plans that council has. So there's projects in the plan, including the milling machine, that are tied to the core review. So this isn't money to spend on a phase 2 core review. This is projects that are in the plan that are a result of recommendations or initiatives out of the core review.
So we didn't, so all of these things are what the core review suggested?
So there's $568,000 of projects in the plan that are related to the core review.
Oh.
For example, like the milling machine.
Okay, and then the next one,
And then council directives, so there's projects in the plan that total $472,000 that are related to council directives. There's $3.5 million related to business cases that support the plan. There's things that are tied to our asset management plan. So this is just breaking down how the project plan breaks down by different other plans that we have within the city. So it doesn't mean we're not spending any money on a phase 2 core review. There's nothing in the budget for that.
okay, because that's what it seems like to me, that was a core review that we're spending money on. No, it seems like a lot of money.
It's trying to make that connection for you of how the projects in the plan tie to other initiatives and plans and master plan and documents within the city, so that you can see that when we're bringing these master plans forward, stuff is being implemented from them.
Great, thank you. And then the following one down there is a dam inspection review report for $765. I thought staff did a great job with mitigating what we were doing with the second dam.
Yes, so this isn't necessarily tied to Colliery Dam. Every year they do annual dam inspections, and there's things like log booms that need to be replaced, rock scaling. So there's different recommendations that come that tie to both our recreational and water supply dams of improvements and work that needs to be done. So that's not specific to Colliery dams.
Great, thank you.
Ms. Gurry, did you wish to get on board here?
Thank you, Chair. I confirmed with finance staff that about the legal and city solicitor, if there was council desire to look into the business case and make a decision on that, that doesn't impact the tax rates or the budget. So you could go forward, adopt the budget, and make any decisions you wanted to about that position afterwards. So because it's legal expenses either with or without the city solicitor position, it's all that same amount of budgeted money. So I just wanted to let you all know that.
Thank you. Simply an offset. Thanks. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, ladies, for your presentation, and my apologies for being late. First, I would be personally interested in a business case for the city solicitor. My question relates to borrowing. Close to your last slide, I just want to make sure I'm reading this correctly. Our limit is 38.7 million, and our 2017 borrowing was 4.3 million?
No, so our limit for debt servicing is 38.7 million. So that's how much we could make an annual principal and interest payment. So that's not the total amount we could borrow. That's the total amount we could have in the budget for debt servicing payments.
So how does our if I may, how does our actual borrowing or debt at this point compare with our allowed limit?
So we're at 11.2% of our
Okay.
debt servicing limit.
All right, thank you. So in other words, there is lots of room for borrowing if we so choose.
Correct.
As a follow-up, then, could you give me a borrowing 101 synopsis of what is allowed for borrowing and what type of projects are not? And I'm thinking specifically of the options for funding the NRE, where staff recommended that borrowing would not be appropriate for that.
So borrowing is not appropriate for the NRE because you asked us to explore options to provide a grant to the NRE. You cannot borrow money for stuff we don't own. So we can borrow money for infrastructure the city owns. We cannot borrow money to provide a grant to another organization.
All right, thank you.
So we have to borrow for stuff we own.
That makes sense. Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Kipp, next in queue.
Oh, thank you very much. Can you tell me, and I appreciate the staff's report, like Councillor Hong, sometimes it's nice to go over the report that's in our agenda because that's what we get to study. And when we see this today, it's just all new information. It throws me for a bit of a loop because it's presented in a different format and it re-engages my mind and starts to make me have a whole bunch of questions again. So I appreciate that when we get the agenda, that this comes out with it, because it now forms part of the agenda that comes late to the table. And then we want to vote on late things and people are bringing up votes and things like that. So thank you very much. So, can you tell me what were your budget guidelines? Did we have a base format like zero-based budgeting? What do you use for budget guidelines and the method you use for preparing our budget?
So when we do the operating budget, each manager meets with their financial analyst, and they actually start with no budget. They have to build their budget line by line for every single cost.
And we have written guidelines for that now?
We probably do not, no, we don't have a formal document. They do get instructions, but probably not in the format you're speaking of.
Okay, thank you. So there's no policy, there's just you meet and you have a strategy to do it, but there's nothing written down.
They do get direction, but it's not a formal policy.
Okay, and is there a 3- and 5-year averaging of our budget costs, or is that just your 5-year plan that we, I know, like say so, and does it include inflationary costs? Do you have any of that averaging?
So years 2 through 5 of the financial plan do include 2% inflation on expenditures, unless we have better information. If we have better information for years 2 through 5, we use that. And then for revenue, we use 1% for, I believe it's fees and charges. Let's get my notes here. And the other revenue we leave as is to be conservative. Yeah, 1% for revenue, fees and charges and sales of service, and we leave 0% for other revenue, because we're always conservative on the revenue side.
Okay, yeah, well, I see we have 180 in revenue and 138 in spending. That's a good way to run it. So you're taking more in. So I appreciate the follow-ups on that then. When we have our 20-year targets, and we have these drivers that come up now. I see that we're basically $3 million up in costing now because that's what I can't, and this isn't paginated, so it's hard to refer back to, but it's the, and the key drivers in that, when I look at it, the net expenditure increases is $3 million. And I know that the budget drivers, wage and benefits, 2.4, RCMP contracts, $1 million. And so basically, a good portion of that increase is based on wage and benefit and RCMP contract. They add up to 3.4 million, and the net expenditure is 3 million. Am I correct on that?
Well, yeah, but you also have $1 million for asset management, and you have 800,000 with the transition to the strategic infrastructure reserves. So you're looking at 1.8 million just between those two.
You can remember my fear of only 1% of the asset management, that I believe it's far above what it is on a $3 billion 60-year equation. Breaking it down, I think we're way behind on our asset management, and I think our 20-year plan shows 250 million short. So thank you very much for that reminder. Currently, we made a motion in December to do a core service review second phase. December, this council voted 5-4. And it's documented. So who took, I thought that was going forward, and I thought we were going to report to move that forward. And where, and how did that get taken out of our motion?
Never directed to add that to the budget.
But there's a council motion on, is there, December 4th?
In December, the CFO was acting director of financial planning. There was no direction given to my department to add that to the budget.
Okay, so we could add it now, if we want.
Add it now.
Okay, that would be a good thing. Thank you very much. And on a follow-up, the RDN right now with the requisition, I'm extremely concerned that there's going to be a 20-year contract signed for organic waste without open tender and some confusion on that. So I think other things are coming from the RDN, especially with our waste departments. So I want to do that. And then the legal thing, and I think it balances out, and I think the litigious nature of this council and the people who have been, and all the paperwork that's caused lawyer, and that those all allegedly, I like that term, allegedly. I think it's a good position to have for a corporation nowadays, to have internal service of a lawyer, so that's one that I'll work on. I think other thing, back in October 3rd, 2016, we had our core service review implementation plan. And just quickly on the numbers, you guys won't have this in front of you, but it's for my review on the core service review. The city strengthens its corporate policy framework to guide design, delivery, tracking, and reporting of all municipal services and activities. You know my concerns with purchasing over time. What have we implemented to track and make sure everything goes through a purchasing department? Are we doing that now?
Sorry, can you repeat your question? Sorry.
Well, our procurement policies, I've had concerns with the loopholes in our procurement policy, and that we passed a motion a long time ago that we strengthen those frameworks on delivery and tracking, reporting of all municipal services and activities. Have we implemented?
Well, they have implemented a new purchasing policy, and that was, the idea behind that was to strengthen any of the perceived loopholes or whatnot.
They were shown to be in the core service.
Yeah, okay, so, yeah. So there have been improvements, and they're continuing to track and maintain their system under the new policy.
Okay, and further to that, it goes on further about, I'm concerned with our SAP system. We've heard that it functions at about 10%, and some people in departments don't have access to that SAP. So are we truly managing across our organization and have a control from finance? If our main key asset of finance is the SAP program, we spend millions of time I've been here, since Rain went out for 2 years, the first decade ago, over a decade ago. So for my SAP training in here, so the department, because can you imagine, I've heard of issues where it should take 5 minutes, but the person's away for 7 days, so they're not in that department, they're on holidays, but they can't get the report because that person's the only one that runs that system. So is there budget training for those type of things in our, or is it the same training that's taken us to this point now?
There is money in the budget for SAP training. We do have internal training as well. So there is money for external training as well as our IT department provides training.
And we've improved, what I'm saying, have we bumped that up to push the system-wide use of SAP?
We are currently undertaking a review right now of the capacity that, we're looking to see what is out there and what do we, like the purchasing department in particular they're starting to use their contract management systems and things like that. So we are exploring more usage of the SAP system as well. So, and there is a push on that right now. So that is something we are undertaking and there is money in the budget for that.
So I appreciate that. My questions, I'll have them in front of the public too, when we go to public with this budget, just as you know. So if you need any more information, you can ask me. Thank you.
No further questions? Next in queue is Mayor McKay.
Thank you. So if we follow the teachings of George Cuff, one of the things he repeats over and over and over again is two of our primary responsibilities are the size of the civil service and our budget. Our budget in 2013 for legal services was about $385,000. This year, in 2017, it's reported to be about $890,000. If you recall, when we were putting together when we were voting on the selection of the firms to provide legal services, I asked council to consider putting a budget to that contract, or to those multiple contracts. And I suggested, based on what we were being told at the time, that we could expect something in the order of 450,000, that we put a cap on it of 500,000. Now, council didn't believe that that was the way to go, but if one of our primary responsibilities is setting budget, I can't for the life of me understand why we don't set a budget for an individual line item like this, particularly something that's as variable as this appears to be. The other thing is, with respect to the size of the civil service, and that is two things. One, in 2012, we were asked to vote as a council on a whole number of initiatives, including an auditor, an internal auditor, and a communications manager, as well as other things, because they were increased level of services, as opposed to just simply increases in size of departments. So for example, due to growth, if you need extra garbage man, one would suggest that if you approve your budget, that you would approve that as part of your budget. However, with legal services, I consider that to be an increased level of service, therefore requiring a determination or a vote of council or a motion of council to do that, not done internally. So can somebody tell me, is the addition of a new position an increased level of service that requires a motion of council, as we did in 2012, or can it be done internally?
So it would need council approval, like it would come in the budget and then council would approve that. So the creation of it would be a staff suggestion, but ultimately you would approve it in a budget presentation such as this.
So follow up if I could, Mr. Chair. In 2012, we were specifically brought a staff report that requested that council increase levels of service. So was that proper or was that improper? Are we doing it now properly or improperly? The fact is that, if I believe George Cuff, that we have responsibility for the size of the civil service, then I think it needs to go to council.
If I might just weigh in, the size of the civil service is something that we adopt when we do the budget on an annual basis without the definitive minutia of everything that we are asked to approve. And so that's where these sessions of the Finance and Audit Committee are to drill down. So I would concur with you that this is the place to drill down and say, higher service level. And there's been many iterations for the 13 years that I have sat here on how we adopt the annual operating budget. And it has been different on almost every occasion. Although what might be stated that, no, it's this, we do it the same. The only thing that's the same is that we get it done before the middle of May. What is the opportunity that we have here is to say exactly what you're requesting. So there could certainly be a motion made that would ask for higher service levels. If this would be one of those items, it would be a higher service level because it went beyond the posted budget for 2018, if there was a budget for it, and that we would like to control that, as you said, cap. And I think caps are really important, so that when we do come back to this table, or we do get a quarterly update, staff can say to us, in the fourth quarter, in Q4, here's where you're going to be over, here's where you're going to be under, here's where you're going to be on, in a business world. So we may need to draw back here a little bit, or where we have more money to spend here because of efficiencies or otherwise. I don't know if I've helped in a response, but indeed, I think the case that you're making is an important one, and there's many more cases like this. We have many consultants and legals that went from a $20,000 to just under $80,000 that council didn't vote on. Smaller number, same principle, the McKenzie report. So there's so many of those. So would I agree that council needs to be more engaged with the business cases and the processes to get here? 100%.
I could have a follow-up on that with respect to motion of council. There was a motion in 2012 that we implement a higher level of service by way of appointing a communications manager. That motion's never been rescinded. Therefore, as far as I'm concerned, the position of communications manager is still on the books unless council agrees to rescind it. I don't see any communications manager in the budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hong.
Thank you. I'd like to get back to Mayor McKay's topic later on for future discussion, but I'll stick with the questions to staff. With regards to the RCMP contract, you said that we increased it from 92% to 93%, is that correct?
Yeah, so we don't budget for the full amount of the contract because we never have full staffing. So in 2017, we budgeted at 92% of the contract. This year, we've gone back up to 93% of the contract,
And
which is historically where we have budgeted.
so why have we done that? Because if I'm not mistaken from what the RCMP have told us, they're really understaffed. So are we gonna have all this extra money for no apparent reason? Because they're under 66, under 70%. So
In 2017, we were almost exactly on budget first.
So why wouldn't we stick with the 92 to be on budget? I think that's good budgeting. And if we go over budget, then we go over budget. But to have extra, unless I'm told where that money is going to be going to, or if we need to do what we did with the snow removal and saying that, hey, we need to increase our reserve budget, well, for the RCMP, well, let's put that as a separate line item to say that we're going to increase the RCMP reserve in case there's murders and, high-profile crimes that occur. But for us to not budget properly and then say, well, we got some extra money, so we'll just kind of slide it through to a reserve somewhere else. I'd rather be specific, like what we did with the snow and ice how we actually have as a line item that we're increasing by $170,000 to bump up that reserve so that people out there can see that why we do it. And if we're budgeting is at 92% and you're on 90%, that's great. That's awesome budgeting. I commend you and for the staff for getting that number correct. But if you're going to increase it to 93 just for the sake of increasing it to 93 without a valid reason, just because, oh, you used to do that before, it doesn't seem valid. And if you want to say we should increase by 0.1% for reserves for the RCMP, I'm fine with that as well, as long as we have it as a separate line item for that specific reason. Thank you. And then thank you very much for providing, the operating capital funds in a 5-year without giving the totals away. For the public, it's great to see. But when I have to go through this, I don't know if this is the same as the one I had before. So for me to cross-reference on what year we're doing some of these things, because everything is blanked out, it makes it difficult to see where it is. So it'd be great if I got a yellow copy of the page 58. Well, yeah, I think we've gotten it, but I just never know if it changes, and by the time we get here, I don't know whatever changes. So for me to have a yellow copy of page 58 to the rest of the page with each year item before I get here, it helps a lot. But I love the fact that you left this blank for the public, because I hate showing what the public were willing to spend each year for it. So this is great, but for me to look at these items, it would be really helpful. Because like I said, one concern I have, well, it's not a concern, but on page 61, under Bevan Complex, you have the ARP and you have /Herald Engineering Review. So I'm hoping that's a past review because you've listed Herald Engineering. And I'm hoping that this is already tendered, because if it isn't tendered, you've already given out who you've given the contract out to. So it's just some of those things that I don't see anybody else, any other company's name listed on these other ones except this one.
So, Councilor Hall, you're misunderstanding. That's the supporting document. So that project, as a result of the Herald Engineering Review that was previously completed. So when you see that supporting document column, that is the document that supports the project and the plan. So a Herald Engineering Review was conducted on Bevan Complex, and the project that we're doing in the plan is a result of that review they did in a previous year.
But then who did the sustainability project right underneath it?
So a sustainability project just means that's a sustainability project that'll be funded from our sustainability reserve, and we would have conducted a payback analysis to make sure that it was a viable project that we should be investing in.
And the one right before that?
So ARP stands for it's from our asset management plan.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, so this is just to help you understand where the projects come from, that they come from different plans, reviews, that sort of thing. They're not just, oh, let's do this and put it in the plan. There's supporting documentation that back up the projects in our plan.
Yeah, and that does come with our big book that we can go through. But like I said, when we see this, unless I have that big book that flips through each individual project, that you do have these supporting documents, it makes it difficult for us to look at it when we're here at this table. Great, thank you.
Councillor Yocum.
Thank you. Thank you. My final comment again on the legal fees is, I must say, you guys did a great job, and I apologize, because all the legal fees is all because of us, not them. I just want to be crystal clear. All the nonsense over the last 3.5 years. But nevertheless, what I want to touch on is the RCMP conversation and response to health and social safety issues. Wonder if there's space, I asked our finance staff, is if there's any movement we can do, for the simple fact is the social issues obviously has been forefront in the last 6 weeks plus, but it's been there for a long time. It's not, unfortunately, as we grow and where the social issues and wellness, it's not going to go away. And I really believe we have to put a position or two between RCMP and the city, a sort of a social work generalist. I know it doesn't sound like a municipal type role thing, but I really believe with all the subjects happening, Mr. Horn is carrying a lot on that to carry all these issues. And I really think a generalist between RCMP, and I don't think it's the best use of RCMP time to be doing social worky type roles, and also some of the skill set, the manager here with great skill set, and staff and that type of role. So I think, because this issue is not going to go away, so we should invest in it a little bit. And I don't know, I'm babbling right now, but I know we have to do more. It's such a budget near $200 million. I would think 180 million I just seen. We would, it would go miles for the citizens, the business owners, the city, et cetera. So hopefully we can have a dialogue on that in the next now till the May or whenever we got to pass this budget. And so this is my concern, because it's not going to go away and we are understaffed in that area. Thank you, council and staff.
Maybe I could just ask people to reserve their dialogue to questions specific to the presentation and/or the budget. And then when we get into debate on how we would like to proceed to take what we'd like to take to council from this committee, would be an opportunity to make those additions or deletions or changes. Ms. Gurry.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to clarify a couple things. I think that the finance staff could probably help me too. I believe the 92% for our CMP to 93% was for those two positions that are up there. Is that correct? And the increase from 2017 to 2018, or no, for the
The $1 million increase for the RCMP contract is made up of several components. It's the overall increase. The RCMP has increased costs that are passed along to us. We have 3 new members, and then there's also the change in how we budget for from 92 to 93% of the contract.
Yeah, so the 3 new
So
members,
it's
okay.
not $1 million is the 1%, correct?
And then for the communications manager question and/or comment, the staff change highlights that staff bring forward to you at budget time are for council's approval. So the communications manager was probably brought back in 2012 or whenever that was for council approval, an either or at the time, and council approved it. And then at this time now, it is on another slide as being removed from the changes, positions removed. So this is the time when council would make those decisions.
Thank you. Councilor Armstrong.
Thank you. You talked about that we're down to 5.9 million instead of the 7 million that we were going for. Is there a rationale, like we've decreased it each year instead of going up? What is the rationale for that?
So in for the
Could
20...
I just ask for clarification, Councilor Armstrong, on what you're...
The infrastructure
Thank you.
asset management, right?
You're referring to the decrease in general funding for project
Sorry,
expenditures, correct?
Yeah, that's correct, yeah.
So in 2017, the one change that was made was 600,000 for the property acquisition used to be funded from general revenue. In 2017, that was switched over to the strategic infrastructure reserve. So that's when we dropped from 7 million to 6.4 million. And then for the 2018 budget, there was a number of projects removed from the project plan that was presented in draft for provisional. And rather than what would have been an ideal situation is when those projects were removed, that we would have maintained the funding from general revenue to keep in line with our 20-year plan. So we would have funded other projects that remained in the plan from general revenue, but that didn't occur. Instead, there was a decrease of $500,000 in project funding, so basically a 0.5% property tax reduction by removing those projects.
And would that not require council approval to do that? If that's what our goal, like just, you know, being new to the game here? I would think that if we're going to go into what we want as our long-term plan, that we shouldn't be touching those dollars without council approval.
I think that's why in our presentation today, and I think this also occurs with the staffing changes that you're discussing here, why it's valuable that there is proper disclosure of what is in and what is not in the budget, so that council has that opportunity before you approve provisional budget and before you approve final budget, that you understand staff positions that are in, that are out, changes to project funding based on what you anticipated from the 20-year plan. I think that's why these types of presentations are crucial, so that you have proper disclosure and you fully understand the budget that you were approving.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Armstrong. If I understood correctly, too, what you were asking, and what I heard was, since the provisional budget was approved, there's been changes
Sorry, between drafts and provisional projects were removed, that dropped the funding for.
And so since the provisional in December, nothing's been altered or changed or removed?
Just the changes that I highlighted, sorry, the changes that I highlighted in the one slide summarize what has occurred between provisional and final.
So those were council initiatives through a vote of council?
Most of those were council initiatives. Some were at the direction of the CFO.
Okay, thank you.
There's another page.
Thank you. I have Councillor Fuller next in queue.
Yeah, a few questions. There's been a number of comments with regards to outstanding, what I see as outstanding reports, which would be really helpful if we had those to make decisions on budgeting. I know at one point, ages ago, I requested a report on increasing the $1,000 per door, which tends to go into the Housing Legacy Reserve, because in other communities it's far higher than what we have. So that's just one of the reports. I'd like to know which reports we have out there. That might be for another discussion. I also recall hearing mentioned at one of our budget meetings that it makes sense to separate capital and operating projects. And all I see is a list of projects, but I do see the costs as separated: capital project costs, operating project costs. But I'm unable to do the math on that because I don't know which are capital and which are operating. That's on page 50 or 55.
55 in the
So
page?
if possible, I would like to have those separated so that I know which is which. And like I say, I can't remember why it was a good idea, so I'll find that out, but I would like to have them separated. And also towards a motion I will be bringing forward, I notice there's nothing with regards to unfunded liabilities. And that is becoming a huge issue in every level of government because of the borrowing that would be needed to fund these. So at some point I will be, and hopefully before the agenda is passed, I will be making a motion to have whatever unfunded liabilities we do have listed in our financial plan. So, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody that hasn't? No, I think everybody said it's next in queue, Councillor Kipp.
Oh, yeah, just on that, unfunded liabilities for sick leave, accrued sick leave, regular benefits and that, where do those come from? Where are they typically funded in? Because I understand we've had moved some from surplus into those accounts.
So each year, so every 3 years, we have an actuarial adjustment that takes into account active sick leave, retirement benefit sick leaves, as well as a couple other, as a IAFF retirement. And they take data, and then they go away and they do their magic with their numbers, and they come back and tell us what, based on our information, what that liability is. So currently, we have, I think it's $7.4 million liability sitting on our financial statements right now. And that each year we adjust to what the actuarial says our liability should be. And so this year it was about $690,000, and that gets recorded into the operations. So each year we take the difference between last year, what happened, and then what the liability should be this year, and we take that and we distribute it through the appropriate cost center. So whatever, if the revenue related, or if the expense related to finance, it went to a finance cost center. If it was fire, it went to fire, that kind of thing. So it's adjusted each year through our operations, which is, from what I can see, is standard. So that's funded through our operations. And we don't have an unfunded liability currently. We have, because an unfunded liability is defined as something you don't have savings for. And currently, it is funded. We have more assets, than we do liabilities. And so currently, it is a funded liability.
So I can follow, so there's an asset attached to that. It
There
has
is-
to be asset attached.
Yes, so a cash, we have savings for it, so there is cash to cover that in the event that we had to pay out that liability.
Okay, so that has a follow-up question for me that shifts off from that. If we have, if we tax on 100% of our capital projects, and we don't complete those projects, and from the reports I've had, we sometimes can move up to 40% of our capital planning forward, and move it forward, and that becomes a surplus in some cases because the project gets canceled or whatever. I understand that you can't use that type of surplus, though, for funding any of those liabilities. Am I correct?
If a project is carried forward, there is no surplus attached to it because it just, that funding goes to the next year. So there is no,
But if that project is pulled, it's canceled, it takes from, 5, 6 years, it gets moved through because we're only doing 60% of our work, 40% is not getting done. And that, you just can't catch up and do 140% the next year, so it continues. So projects are getting left behind, they're getting taken off and on the budget. Council, like the mayor says, what are we accountable for? What is our spending authority? What is our delegation of authority? And when things manipulate around, it's at the expertise of our staff or policy advice now. So what I'm saying is, we don't fund any of those unfunded liabilities. They're asset managed. That's what I'm asking.
in the definition of an unfunded liability, we have cash to cover that. So I'm not quite sure how to answer your question, and I would have to look in to see if there is rules around not using money from a project that's been canceled
Or
to,
a surplus is more my concern.
Yeah.
From a surplus. It may not just be from a project that wasn't done. It may be, it just comes out of surplus. And I didn't think the surplus, because it was attached to something else, could be directed to something as an asset. Because it's already allocated as an asset, even though it's surplus, it's an allocated asset, financial asset. It's money going to something, so it can't be used to fund something else unless that is canceled.
so, well, if that is the case, then almost every municipality in the province is doing it wrong.
Yeah, I suggest that from an accounting practice, but that's okay. It just needs, we need rules. We need policies to say that. I know, and remember, we didn't even fund assets until we started barking at it 2009. We just went and borrowed. And now we started to do asset management. And the provincial government made municipalities do it, starting 2009. Companies have been doing it for decades. And so now I suggest that it's a shifting again from no asset management to asset management to liability management too. And I see that coming. I
And
may
we-
be out of my
yeah.
mind. Some people have suggested that. Thank you.
We could certainly budget for that too.
Quit smiling at that. Thank you.
Just a comment on that, at the RDN level, when there's projects, and they go into their specific file, so to speak, and no monies come in or out of that allocated project, it just stays. And if it's over, then they come back and ask us, we need more. If it's under, it just stays with that project only, whereas I think we move money a little bit around more than, that might have been part of the point. Councillor Yocum, did you have a question?
Yeah, thank you. On page 55 or 50 in this package, just for my clarity, towards the bottom, it says grants and private contributions, 6.7 million. Is that for like grants we do around, can you give me examples? Sorry, I'm babbling here.
So that'd be like the $3.8 million that we received for the waterfront walkway. That's included in the $4.8 million in 2018.
Well, that's money receiving, coming in from
Yeah, that is
like
a
proposals
source
and
of
whatnot.
funding for our projects, correct.
Thank you, clarity now. I thought I had a reverse and we were paying that out. Anyways, thanks.
Councillor Hong.
Thank you. On page 5 of our agenda, with regards to pills, I see that in 2018 that we're getting 1.8 million, and in 2019 we're getting 671.
That's spending, we're spending 1.8 million. So you'll see at the top there, it says, about halfway down the page, it says funding sources. These are all how we're going to fund our projects. So we're using 1.8 million in 2018 to fund projects.
So why aren't we using more in the upcoming years?
Well, we only receive $400,000 a year, I believe it is, in pills. So we only have so much available in the reserve.
So then we need to address, when are we gonna address the PILT question? I think we've brought this up several times on what the negotiations are, or when they're gonna start, because if I'm not mistaken, aren't the PILTs expired already?
Yes,
The agreements for PILTs were expired.
yes.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. I don't have anybody else on the queue. I had some questions.
Not really working well today.
Sorry, I don't have anything, but you're more than welcome.
Put the mic on.
Hang on one sec. Here we go.
There's several things here, but I'll eliminate some. Last year, I think it was last year, we canceled the Nanaimo Economic Development grant to that organization, and then it folded. The same thing with the DNBIA. So I'm wondering if that same amount was then removed from the budget, or we kept some in for some granting. Was there money that wasn't kept in, was withdrawn from the budget? How did we deal with that?
Well, you do have the downtown Nanaimo grants for $150,000.
Right.
So when you eliminated the DNBIA, we do have the downtown Nanaimo grants funding this year.
Yeah, but there was, I think there was 250,000 went to the DNBIA, and so that accounts for 150?
Well, the DNBIA also was matching, that we collected and then we matched what they collected. and we
Right,
paid
which
it
was
over.
about 250,000 so far as I recall. So there's 100,000 that's been taken out of this budget, I guess.
I would guess so.
Yeah.
Sorry, I can't remember off the top of my head. I believe you're correct.
Yeah. So, and the reason I'm asking this is because then we put in 350,000 of our money without any matching funds from the DMBIA. And I'm just not sure of how that accounting gets done. We took out 250,000 from our budget. And then we returned 150 or 160 for grants that we spent. That leaves almost 100,000 that had formerly been in our budget and is no longer. And then later, when we found that downtown was experiencing some problems, we added 360,000. So what's the math on that? How much have we spent, more or less? Are we planning to spend more or less?
I think the more that we're spending, it was the council on initiative when we just ponied up the 375 or whatever, response to health, social, and safety issues. 336, 965. Is that what you're, I think?
Well, I mean, there's three different things I'm talking about. One is the $250,000 that the business owners chipped in for downtown improvements. There was the $250,000 that the city chipped in for downtown business improvements or downtown area improvements. That's $500,000, 250 coming from outside of our budget. So now we're going to spend 336, so it sounds to me like we are spending more than we were. So that's what I think. And if I'm wrong, maybe someone could send me an email and tell me how I'm wrong on that. So I wanted to suggest that Councillor Yoakum's idea of an additional social work position is something I would support. I think we need that, and clearly we're willing to spend some money on it. I'd like to see that happen. And I think that we need, when there's going to be a significant increase to our budget by way of a position, that staff or the senior staff think it would be a good addition. I want to see I do want to see the business plan before it gets entered in, simply because it makes it easier for me to understand. It's a really big document. I remember in years past, we'd go through line by line, but then we'd get ourselves really enmeshed in things we didn't need to, like how many chairs we needed to buy for the auditorium. And there was a very tedious but vigorous discussion, and we finally ended up splitting the difference and saying that Parks and Rec could buy half the chairs they asked for. So those kinds of things I don't think are within our purview, but certainly adding a position like in-house counsel, that's a real departure from what we've done. I would like to see that. I don't know what the answer was on the communications director. Looked like it was removed, and I would like to put that back in. So, I don't know. The chief sustainability officer, that, I wasn't really clear on what that position was, and so it was a little baffling, but then it became even more baffling when the position was removed because the event center work was done, and I never had understood that those two things were somehow matched. So that's why it's really important for this council to be involved in the additions, major additions to our budget. So if the mayor wanted to make a motion to add the director of communications, would that be appropriate at this point? Is that what we're looking for today, or are we just talking?
If you would like to make changes to the budget, it would be preferable that bring those motions forward today, because there is work we have to do behind the scenes to make those additions and
Okay.
calculate the property tax increase,
Okay.
and to meet our deadline with the provincial government.
Okay, well, then I would move that,
Could I just
Yes,
ask that we,
sir.
if you could just hold your motions?
sure.
And because we do have, if there is anybody that wishes to speak from the audience, and then once we receive the presentation, following our questions, then we can get into debate on what we'd like to add or
Thank you.
delete or otherwise. Thank you. Councillor Hall.
Thank you. I guess I can help answer Councillor Brennan's question, but I'll ask staff to make it in the form of a question. Did the DMBIA ever provide security services and homeless shelters for that $300,000 that we contributed towards for the downtown?
3,000 for security on their budget.
But I'm just saying, for the $300,000 that we apparently added to bump that budget up where Councillor Brennan thought we were losing out, did the DMBIA do those jobs for that money that we allocated towards? Like a homeless drop-in shelter for $100,000, showers?
Not to my knowledge. Like, I don't know what exactly the DNBIA did provide. I know they did a bit of security, I believe, but
So
to
this
the
is,
other items, I don't know.
so they're, in your opinion, they're totally different things than what DMBIA provided compared to what council approved?
They could be.
Great, thank you. And then if we're going to be making motions and talking about staff, I like all of these have a business case. One I don't understand, like I said, is what we did with the RCMP, and it says major case files specialist. And then we ended up hiring a major case files supervisor. So, well, why don't we just, it's just the way that it's worded. So I like some more information on if we're going to do that for these, because I think we have a lot of social issues and everything else. And if we're going to use staff resources for the RCMP, I like them. I understand that we have a lot of major case files, and I know that consumes a lot of time. And so I'd like to see a logic. If we're going to be logical for one position, then it would only make sense to be fair for all these other positions if somebody's going to make that comment or motion. Seems to make sense to me. But I'll have that for the discussion part. Thank you.
What are you on?
Just to follow up to Councilor Hall, I do believe when you approved the 3 RCMP members, to civilian members were part of that discussion, and those are those two members. I'm sorry, that was in camera, so I'm not privy to the minutes of that meeting, and maybe Karen can comment
Well,
on
I think
that?
we approved 2 members, but we weren't, nobody said what the positions were, and we never saw a business case for those. So if we're asking for a business case for everything else and all these other, because again, according to whoever my colleagues discussed, this is a new position, so we should have a business case, if that's where we're gonna go with it, because
Yes,
let's have business-
yeah, I don't know what you were all provided with in camera,
Well-
but I believe those came out of the in-camera meeting.
yeah, it was just 2 civilian positions.
Yeah.
And that's what it was.
Thank you. I don't have anybody else in the queue. I just have a couple of quick questions, if I may, please. You mentioned that we have a anticipated surplus and $500,000 was being allocated out of the anticipated surplus. Can you tell me what the estimated surplus is?
Yes, so there will be a report coming. We're just dealing with the auditors right now, but the surplus was about 2.6 million. And what we've done is we put 500,000 aside for the MSP, and we split the remaining between general capital reserve and property acquisition reserve, because that gave council the most flexibility with using those monies for future projects, especially with land acquisitions such as like affordable housing and things like that coming up. We wanted to provide as much room for you to make decisions.
Okay, so, thank you. So we're anticipating a $2.5 million surplus, of which we're taking $500,000 to compensate for the 2.7 to 3.18 or 3.2.
Yes.
And if we didn't go to 3.2, then we would be at a 2 million plus or minus surplus, which would take us, if we use that 500,000, back down to 1.6 or 1.7 or 1 point whatever. So we would still have, because we are anticipating a $2.5 million surplus.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, increasing the by going to 3.18 from 2.7, when we know that we're going to have a $2.5 million surplus, seems to me that that's a perfect offset opportunity for us without increasing to 3.2. We know that we're going to be at a surplus regardless at $2 to $2.5 million. And we don't get the chance to sit here, in my opinion, and say, okay, oh, good, we're going to have a surplus. Here's where I want to spend that surplus. It just goes somewhere at the end of the year. And I have to make a comment that, so the $800,000 from our Great Canadian Casino revenues that are generated is going to our Strategic Infrastructure Reserve Fund, which drops us to whatever the number is in our Great Canadian Casino account, if you will. But the Great Canadian Casino annual amount is increasing. Like, have we talked to the Great Canadian, do we know what we're forecasting, estimating for 2018 from 2017 on the Great Canadian Casino contributions?
We don't have the number off our top of our head. I mean, it could fluctuate because I believe it's dependent on revenues from the casino. So it could fluctuate depending on.
So when we budget for that, when you budget for that, do you budget it just to remain constant? Or do you budget for it after dialogue to say, how are we looking for 20? How do you do that? How do you do that?
So they look at prior years. So they look at prior years, what we've had and what we've had in the past. Unless they have some information that says they're going to get more, they look at what they've had in the past. Because there is no other indicator of whether that's going to be more or less.
Okay, so I understand that it's going up. My next question would be in relation to our water user fees, and I know it's not a tax, it's a user fee. Is there any, and I'm hearing that Lanceville is going to be coming back to us with our water agreement. Is there any compensation that we may accrue in an agreement with Lanceville for water that would impact our budget accordingly? I see Mayor McKay and Councillor Thorpe might have some information or share. Nothing? Nothing? Would you be able to respond if there might be some revenue opportunities as a result of any Lanceville agreement, water agreement adjustments?
We couldn't accrue for anything unless it was something that we had and billed them for, or event that they hadn't paid for yet. Do you know what I mean? Like, we couldn't accrue something that hasn't happened. So we could.
Fair enough, that's fine. Like, I get it, no estimates on what the potential revenue case might be. So really what we're being asked today is to approve 2.7 plus or minus to 3.2 plus or minus. That's what you're asking us to approve today with
We're asking you to approve the 3.18%.
3.18. So I just, because then we're going to get into debate when a motion is made or not. The $500,000 represents that half a point. Did we look at any other offsets? So we have council initiatives that have or haven't added up to the increase. Did we look at any other offsets so that we don't have to increase taxation by half a point through reserves, through other methods that we have available to us, especially when we know we're going to be at a $2.5 million surplus?
Well, many of the items that are the key changes between provisional and final are operating costs, and so we use reserves more for capital projects, for building assets. We don't use them to fund ongoing operating costs. For example, the Nanaimo Art Gallery, that's an ongoing operating cost. A lot of the social and safety issues were one-time operating costs for security. Wages and benefits, we wouldn't fund positions from reserves. So where appropriate, we have funded additions to the budgets from reserves, because there was other changes that occurred, some changes to some projects, but these items were better felt to be funded from property taxation when they're an ongoing operating cost of the city.
Thank you. So did we go back to our departments? Because you indicated earlier that we have meetings with our managers and they start with a blank page. Did we go back and say, we're $500,000 over based on what council's decisions? Find 50. Find it.
One of the difficulties now is we are partway through the year. People have already started programs and operations, so to go back now and ask directors and managers to cut levels of service is difficult when programs are already underway.
Thank you, which leads to what I've been advocating for 10 or 12 years, that by the time we get to the start of the new year, the budget's already established. Thank you. Councillor Hong and then Councillor Kipp.
No, sorry.
Councillor Kipp, were you done?
Yeah, no, I just want one thing. The requisition for the RDN is $20,174,000. It's up $1.93 million from last year, and since the end of 2016, which was 17.1, going to the 20,174, it's up $3 million, the RDN requisition in 2 years. So that's climbing at it went from 17 million to this year, they hope to be at the end of this year, 20 million. So a 2-year increase. And so it's the requisition they're asking for from our most current stats from the other day was $20 million that we taxed for. And with that, because it's confusing for people, when we put out our tax, we know, and we try and explain it, that so much is for the school board, so much is for the province. We're not always clear in our budget of the RDN requisition. And I know I've asked before that, I mean, if we can get these figures from last year, if we had a section in our budget that showed the RDN, because it is part of what our tax people pay for. They get taxed for that. And there, no redundancy in service because it's an à la carte menu. But for me, like I say, we know, I've known for a while now, there's 20 million, but our staff is not informed on that, or don't seem to include that. Is it because it's a separate bureaucracy and we don't want to tread on feet? So I just wanted you to know, 20 million gone up, 3 million, absolutely 3 million, and more than 3 million in 2 years for requisition. And I have EBS. Thank you.
We're all finished with, come on,
Statements.
come on. I'll need a motion to receive the presentation, or is that necessary, Ms. Gray? It's not necessary? No more questions? Thank you very much. Thank you, appreciate it. Therefore, we have received the 2018-2022 financial plan presentation as amended. What is the pleasure of council? Would you like to simply receive, or would you like to ask for more information prior to making decisions? This will come to us April 23rd, is that correct? April 23rd. So I heard in dialogue that there was some information that people would like, the business cases, for some specific items. I heard that there may be some amendments that this council may wish to recommend that may impact the bottom line or the tax increases beyond what we've heard today, plus or minus. So this is your opportunity to make such changes or requests of staff. I have Mayor McKay, and then I have Councillor Armstrong.
No, me.
Oh, sorry, my apologies. I have Councillor, it's all messed up. I have Councillor Yoakum.
Thank you. Before we, first of all, thank you for your daunting, hard task. Before I just want to make it clear, I'm sure some council members are going to make motions. I don't want to make making motions without knowing the financial complications with the wisdom of your team. So I will be basically, if I vote no, it's not because I don't support it, it's because I need to know the financial implications before giving my support behind something. So I think if we just start making motions off the cuff, it's gonna, without knowing the financial.
Notices.
If they're noticing motions, that's a different story. So I just wanted to share that. I'm sharing this more to the council, actually, not you guys. So that's my position for today. Thanks.
Ms. Curry, did you want to weigh in?
Thank you, Chair. So just so council is aware, because of the legislative timelines, if there was changes to be made, I would suggest you make them today and make that recommendation to council, because on the 23rd with the 3 readings, at that time, it's the bylaw and it's there in front of you, and amendments made affect the financial plan and the taxation, et cetera. So today really is the day to make changes and to ask staff what those ramifications of those changes would be.
Thank you. So we can make recommendations today. However, it will come, those recommendations will come back to us on April the 23rd for ratification. So whatever we do today will simply be a recommendation to council. We won't be literally making, we can make recommendations today, and then the recommendations that we make today will go to council for approval or not approval or whatever on April the 23rd.
That's correct, Chair. So you could today approve the 3.18% increase and the budget as is, and recommend that to council. That would then be ratified on April 23rd, and then the 3 readings of the bylaw would occur. Or you could make changes and that would be ratified by council on April 23rd.
Thank you. I have a full board again. Councillor Armstrong, Councillor Brennan, Councillor Hong, and then Mayor McKay.
I'm hoping Chief Fry would be able to answer this. What I'm looking at is the elimination of the bylaw manager's position. I want to know the impact that's had, and should we be looking at reinstating that position?
Thank you. So obviously, I'm doing a dual role right now, which is probably not very sustainable. But as you see, we have included a manager of community safety, which in fact will oversee bylaws and address some of Councillor Yoakum's concerns about more of the public safety issues or community safety issues in our downtown core.
Thank you. That's a prime example of where I would like to see these business cases, because then I can make a much better informed decision on that. So if possible, that's another business case I would like to see. Thank you.
If I understand correctly, all of these positions are included in our budget. So what's,
Positions you see here are included in the financial plan before you.
and so it's simply what's missing is the business case or otherwise, and whether or not, is it reasonable for me to assume then that these positions wouldn't take effect until probably June or maybe even later? So we're really in a 6-month of the year, not 12-month salary compensation implication?
That would not be correct. The buyer position is filled, the legislative services clerk position is filled, the director of engineering and public works position is filled in an acting capacity, and the project technician specialist position has been filled. Vacant are the city solicitor, the manager of treasury and risk. I believe the manager, major case files specialist and supervisor have been posted. I'm not sure if they've been filled or if they're in the interview stage.
Thank you. So interestingly, you know, we've cherry-picked a couple that we want business cases on, but in fact, 50% of these have been, or whatever the number is, have been filled in any event. So, which is normal. It's normal for us not to know all, and at least my time here, all of the positions that arrive at the city since I've been here. And on the occasion in 2012, the communications officer was a late item that was added in the city hall. I recall the meeting, and so it's not abnormal for us not to know the positions that are approved.
In follow-up, business cases were prepared for the city solicitor, for the manager of treasury and risk, as well as the project technician specialist, and those business cases were reviewed in the fall by senior management, as well as the CAO and the CFO.
And senior management agreed with them.
What happens is senior management, we have a roundtable and senior management presents their business cases, and the final decision was made by the CAO and the CFO on which business cases were included in the financial plan. So business cases weren't just for positions, they were also for projects like the LED street lights, for the milling machine, for the Energy Step program, the water hauler stations. So there was a variety of business cases presented, and the final decision is made by the CAO and the CFO in consultation with senior management.
Thank you, which would be normal, I think. Councillor Brennan.
Thank you. So with regard to the city solicitor, council was only advised that this was placed in the budget. Council wasn't given a rationale for it. I understood you to have said, I guess it was Wendy, that it was taken out for this year. Is that correct? Like, it's in there, but it's not funded, or?
No, the position's on hold. The
Right.
position was posted and now the position's been put on hold. So
Okay.
it's still in the budget.
Right.
It's just not posted right now.
Okay. I'd like to see it removed completely with a business case made for 2019 so that we can determine, we will have seen our audit from 2017 when the kind of bulge of legal fees were paid. It will give us an opportunity to see other cities and how they handle the city solicitor position. and what their sort of residual fees are over and above the solicitor. So I'd like to see it removed from this budget. I don't think that that should be a major problem because we've put it on hold at any rate. So I would like it to be prepared for 2019 and we can look at it completely. So I'm not, yeah.
If you do make that recommendation, I would suggest then that you reallocate those funds to legal expenses, because that's how the position was
Sure.
funded.
Yeah.
So I would recommend that be part of your motion if you move that forward.
Okay. So I don't know if this is the time, but I would move that the city solicitor position be removed from the 2018 budget and placed into the legal fees budget, and that a fully comprehensive business plan be presented to council for the 2019 budget. So we haven't lost track of it completely, but we've delayed it and brought forward the information that council requires. If I got a seconder, I suppose that would be.
Moved by Councilor Brand, second by Mayor McKay. I was hoping that we might be able to allow anybody, if there is anybody in the audience that wants to speak before we did this, but that's okay. Do I have anybody that would like to speak to the motion as presented? And I have a whole bunch of people that were on before, so I don't know if you want to take your own name off, and if I see your name on here, it means to me you want to speak to the motion. Next and I have staff left 3. Does somebody did want to be? Okay, thanks. Councillor Hong.
Thank you. Didn't staff say that there was already a business case for the city solicitor? So why do we need to wait till 2018 if we can, all we need to do is see the business case and make a decision if we want to go forward in 2018? What's going to change from this business case in 2018 to 2019 is my question. Just staff or anybody else. If we have the business case, we paid for the business case, well, let's just see the business case. And then if we decide to make a decision whether it's good enough or not, why do we have to wait till 2019? I'm just trying to rationalize this. And then I have to go, but some other things I wanted to mention is the RCM contract. I'd like to reduce that to by $250,000. Pull that from the reserves that we made this year, put it back into RCMP reserves for $250,000. Strategic infrastructure reserve, pull out $250,000 from that one that we're putting in, and then put in from reserves from the 2017 reserves, $250,000. But I'm sorry, Wednesdays don't work for me. I have to go. But I will be back if you're still here.
Thank you. So what I'm gleaming from your comments is that the business plan exists, so that part of the motion may not be required other than providing it to us, because we have it. And I understood that number to be, for the solicitor and the office, to be in the neighborhood of $486,000, so plus or minus $500,000.
206. The position in office is approximately $202,000, and then in the office, there was approximately $205,000 for external legal services, which would stay either
Which
way,
would
even
remain
if
in any
you
event.
removed the city solicitor position. And then, of course, our recommendation is if you remove it, we just convert that budget back to legal budget, because then we'd need external services.
Thank you. I have Councillor Armstrong, and then Mayor McKay, no, sorry, then Councillor Yocum, and then Councillor Kipp.
Just for clarification, I understand when you said that even if we decided to not go ahead with this, it's not going to have an impact on the taxation. So it's not something we have to decide today. Is that correct?
Correct. We could make that change in a future budget bylaw amendment, because it would have assuming you follow a recommendation to convert the position back to legal expenses, it has a net impact of 0 to property taxes.
Yeah. Just my only concern about in-house legal is that we still have to use a lot of other legal services because they're so generalized. So I would like to see the business case, because in previous discussions I had with the CEO, she was against it. So I'd like to know why now she's for it. So I would like to see the research that was done into it before I make a decision to remove it or keep it. Thank you.
Then if I'm hearing you correctly, you're wanting to refer this back to staff to bring forward the business case before council votes on this.
That's what I would like to do, for the simple fact that it's got no impact on our budget. If we keep the funds in, they will, correct? Correct.
Then might I ask the mover and seconder if that meets your acceptance? Okay, then we'll proceed with the motion on the floor.
No, I'll second the referral. She made a motion to refer, I'll second. No debate, just vote on.
That there is actually, is there actually not even a vote, is there? Or no
Yeah.
debate, just a vote?
So Chair, once the motion to be made, to refer has been made and seconded, there is no debate, as Councillor Kipp pointed out, and you would vote on that. If it failed, you would go back to the main motion that is on the floor.
Thank you very much. I'll call the vote to refer the matter of the business case to include or remove the legal from the budget or from this discussion at this time. All in favor? Opposed? See Mayor McKay opposed. It's referred back to staff.
Okay, I don't need to speak, then I'll wait. So I get the report.
Thank you. If it's okay with council, I would just ask if there's anybody here today that would like to speak to the 2018-2022 financial plan before we proceed. Nobody over there? All right. All right. So do I have to do that 3 times? No. Okay, good, cool. All righty. I'll move on then to, if you'd like to add anything else or not.
And Chair, if you don't mind me just giving one more reminder, I'm sorry to harp on this, but any changes that you make today, just so everyone's aware, that will reflect changes in the bylaw that's getting through readings on the 23rd. So changes made today that are different than the 3.18% and that's on here will reflect changes in the bylaw. So the bylaw will be different as well.
Thank you. It will change the content of what we would be approving or not approving on April the 23rd. So if anybody wants to add or delete anything through this committee, it's moving upwards to council for the 23rd. So I have Councillor Kipp, Mayor McKay, Councillor Armstrong, Councillor Yocum, Councillor Brennan, Councillor Fuller. So Councillor Kipp.
Thank you. I appreciate the fact that staff has worked hard on this, and it's an extreme situation right now without leadership. I am having confusion on who's hiring, firing, and how things are going on now, who's making decisions to withhold things, and who's not telling people to do things. So I need some clarification on that. When a motion of council in December is to look into core service review, and since that time it wasn't pushed forward, but that's a motion of council. So who do I talk to now as my CAO to say, why was that not pushed forward? And I guess the mayor has taken over that role. So I would like to know, or somebody, I've heard that. So I have a number of outstanding issues that have cost the city a lot of money. One from almost 2 years ago now. I suggest soil in the park was an extra $300,000. I suggest soil at Howard Avenue was a $100,000, $150,000 error. When do I get the report on those type of things, and when can I balance that with budgeting? Because I have a heck of a time supporting budgets when I don't get information, and then it's really easy for the person that writes that list to know who's on second, who's not, but it's hard for me making the $200 million decision when I don't know that's been filled or this has been filled, or who is hiring those people. Because the mayor's point earlier on spending authority and delegation of hiring authority, we've never had that. We've been told to keep our noses out of that by most of the administrators all along. And when we do hire or ask for a position, it seems like we're not even certain. Because I believe when you talk about a manager of communications, the position was $140,000 pay, but the cost of the job enters around $400,000 to $450,000 with office, computer, and all of that. And I know in the first year of that position, we went from 32 to 72 pieces of paper put out the door. So it's an expensive proposition when you say one position and that gets hired, but who's the secretary taking care of this? Who's filing cabinet? Who's desks and computers and that? So with this, it grows. And the spending authority of hiring and firing, it crosses that border between governance and operations. And George Cuff, when he comes into it, he said, you got to feel it and touch it. So part of me is, the comms position and the things it gets and the current hiring, like who brings back people now? Who lays people off in contracts? Who's handling complaints about staff or council, or who's in a conflict of interest? So that all ties to me. That's all budgets related because it causes liability and it causes funding. So from my perspective, at the rate the budget's at right now, unless the core service review part 2 is included from this council that we voted on December 4th, I cannot support the budget. So I'll be bringing that forward at the open meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor McKay.
Thank you. I just wanted to answer the question with respect to who's leading staff. The mayor is not leading staff. Let's get that straight right now. The person who holds the position of CAO must be appointed, and you've not appointed me as the CAO. Therefore, I am not the CAO. Our staff, our senior staff, our 7 senior managers have come together in a committee style to make these decisions. Council has not objected to that method. Otherwise, we would have appointed an interim CAO. We haven't. So these decisions are being made by the 7 senior managers. Having said that, we need to concern ourselves with where council gets into directing the activities of your CAO or your CAO committee, if you will, as they would normally do. When it comes to terminations of employees or hiring of employees that are improved in the budget, those decisions have always been made by the CAO or his or her delegate. If it's being run by committee, that council has a decision that council has not objected to, then I would suggest we not interfere.
Point of order, Your Worship. I put forward a methodology to manage emergencies and never even hardly got a response from yourself or anyone. And you, as the executive officer for us, is supposed to communicate. You never even responded back when I said we could use a unified command model that's standard throughout British Columbia and many other places. You never even responded. So I'm left up in the air wondering what you're doing, hearing about stuff at the RDN or hearing stuff at this table. And that's my problem, is communication and scheduling. It's been my problem for a long time. So if what it is happening, then let's make a motion, have some leadership and tell us what we have to do or what you think should be done. Because right now, we're rudderless.
I'll have to interject here with the point of order. I think the questions were asked as it relates to.
This is a waste of my life. I'm going public. And I want to talk from the public about this. No, it's not public.
The questions were asked of how decisions are being made, and you responded, and the response was not received. So I'll allow you to proceed with your, unless you were finished.
I'm done.
Thank you. I have Councillor Yocum, Councillor Brennan, Councillor Fuller.
Okay, thank you. I don't know how to go, if I should do a notice or just ask staff if they can kindly see what that, between that, and I think there's been money with the RCMP budget would work, what Councillor Hong was talking about for that social wellness. I don't know what the right term would be, what I was babbling about earlier about this, the health and wellness stuff. I think we need a body or two involved in that, but also at the same time, I'm going to contradict myself because I really believe we should have with the surplus, we could keep the taxes down. So nevertheless, I'm going to ask if on the 23rd, if we can have, see if there's that option, a couple options with that team. And I know it'll fluctuate. I don't know if that's possible, if that's too much to ask. I mean that respectfully.
It is a lot to ask
Okay.
because there is so much work in making one small change, especially to a wage category. There's a lot of, there has to be a lot of change in the background to produce that. So it is a lot to ask.
I was simply, maybe simplify it for myself, on the one piece here where we went up $385,000 for that the safety category. Maybe that without categorizing any subjects, but to deal with that piece of the budget and then maybe, and how it played out. I want to try to simplify this. There was 385, from the work we've done recently around the homeless and whatnot.
But if you would allow me, indulge me here, do we have a Finance and Audit Committee meeting on the 11th of April, or do we not?
Yeah, correct.
And given the asks out of this meeting, April the 11th might even be too soon as it relates to putting the information that we may be asking you to create, or that may or may not already be created. So I'm just wondering if we, and then we don't meet till April 23rd. So if there's a window of opportunity between, if we change the 11th meeting to the 18th, to give you enough time to address the asks, to change the percentages, whatever, depending on what comes out of this table today. And we meet on the 18th versus the 11th, which gives us time before the 23rd, 5 days later, and gives us opportunity to go through whomever we need to go through independently or collectively to say, hey, this is what I heard on the 4th. Was I close? Was I far off? And then the information that's coming back to us on the 18th at this table can be beaten up if necessary before the 23rd. So when we get to the 23rd, it may or may not be smoother. I think the 11th, all I'm saying is right now is the 11th might be too soon, because I don't know what's on the agenda for the 11th, but I'm trusting that there's going to be some stuff coming out of this that's going to be.
Yep.
And maybe the 18th would be a better date.
The 11th would, from a staff structure perspective, would be better. And then that gives us more time to make changes. Like if we would aim for the 11th and get everything that you guys wanted changed in this from today, and we would bring that back next Wednesday for
Okay, thank you.
deliberation.
So I heard that there was the compression of time and the request might be overwhelming. So trying to give you that space to the 18th. Fair enough. Councillor Brennan, Councillor Fuller.
Let's see, I think, yeah, so our task is to make a motion that would end up as a recommendation to council on the 23rd. And at that time, we could debate the question. Yes?
Well, what we're being asked to do is recommend the increase from 2.7 to 3.18 as provided in the overview that we were given.
Right.
That's the ask. Now, if we wish to make any changes, we can do that now to make recommendations for change on the 23rd.
Yeah.
Or we can make those changes maybe on the 23rd if we don't.
I think Sheila said that they would be better off than being made
No,
today.
She did. And I'm sure it's better off to have the information presented now before we get to the 23rd, so it can be on the agenda for the 23rd.
Yes, if you would like to make any changes, we would prefer the changes are provided to us today. Staff will make every attempt to incorporate those changes and bring back a new property tax bylaw to the April 11th meeting for your review, because when we bring it to council on the 23rd, we couldn't make changes on the 23rd. So if you decided you didn't like the property tax bylaw, staff would have to go back and make changes, and we wouldn't be able to make our May 15th deadline. There's not enough council meetings. So any changes you make today or would like today, we would try to incorporate for April 11th, and then we could review the budget again next Wednesday at the Finance and Audit Committee to see if you're happy with the changes.
Okay. So my motion is that the position of Director of Communication be, I don't know, is it filled? Or is it still exist in our budget?
No, it doesn't. So you
Okay,
have to ask
okay. So that we bring back the position of Director of Communication, and that a business plan accompany the recommendation on the 23rd. No? No business plan?
There isn't enough time for a business case to be done in that
Okay.
short a time. But we could add it.
So how about finding the old business plan that was submitted in 2012?
recommended by staff.
It doesn't matter if it wasn't recommended, the case was made. There were some choices, there was choices, there was another accountant, or this, and the recommendation was to hire another accountant, not the communications officer. But I'd just like to see that and see what information we got then, and maybe it's still relevant now. Maybe our memory of how that worked would be sufficient for us, but I think we should have something in paper to back it up.
So the motion on the floor is to reinstate the communication officer position, I assume at its status quo rate, if you will, nothing, and there hasn't been a seconder at this point. Seconded by Councillor Armstrong. Any debate? So I have, Councillor Brennan, are you?
I'm
Fine.
finished, but I noticed Councillor
Okay, so then I have
Armstrong.
Fuller, McKay, Armstrong, Yocum, in that order. Councillor Fuller. Assuming, I'll make the assumption that it's on the
No.
motion? Okay, then
Just heard the motion.
Mayor McKay.
Thank you. I would like to go a little bit further than that. While I support the motion, I would like everybody to realize that there was a motion that was passed, a resolution by council in 2012, and that has never been rescinded. Therefore, I don't believe that staff has the authority, regardless of their rank, to go against a resolution of council unilaterally. By removing the communication manager's position, that's what's happened. It was brought forward as an increased level of service in 2012. It was duly voted on and was approved. So until such time as it's rescinded, it still exists. So in actual fact, I believe that this motion is not required. That in fact, what should be happening is that the resolution that was passed and the position that was created in 2012 should be in the budget, should not be removed. Thank you.
Well, we do have a motion on the floor, and that, regardless of whether or not it should or shouldn't be on the floor, I'll leave that to legislative, because it's not something that I would be able to answer accordingly. I know that we've had other positions that have been taken off the table, and then without our authority or understanding, IT, so I don't want to mention names, but we've had people that have left employ for one reason or another that council hasn't approved being relieved and/or replaced, or the position remaining dormant until such time as the name was changed of the position or something. So there's many examples, but we do have a motion on the floor. And is there any more discussion? I have Councillor Armstrong, Councillor Yocum, Councillor Thorpe, and then Mayor McKay's back
So
on.
on that motion, I believe that we've used outside consultants, media consultants, because of a lot of issues. Is that correct, Ms. Curry? Through you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Councillor Armstrong. I have not utilized any well, that's not true. In the day-to-day communications, I haven't utilized consultants in 2018. There was consultants used in 2017, and in 2018, there actually was a special consultant used for personnel matters, yes.
And do we know roughly what those costs are?
I would have if I was able to look at my budget, I would be able to get you those costs, but I don't know right now.
Because I just would like, sometimes those will cost more than actually keeping the position, so that's something that I'd be interested in knowing. Thank you.
Councilor Yocum.
Here, let's ask our lawyer. Oh, yeah. We don't have one. Anyways, that was supposed to be funny. I won't be able to support this without knowing the budget and the tax increase, and it's not fair for you guys. This process is so not fair for the finance department, and I just mean that with respect to, say, for us to expect and then have all this done by the 23rd of August, or April. Because if I don't know the cost of this former role. I know how the former role came about. I remember being there, but nevertheless, the incident, or one of the incidents, but anyways, sidebar. So I believe I will be able to support this for the fact I don't know what the cost of this position increment would be and the difference it can make on our budget. On all these motions are probably gonna come forward in the next 10 minutes. So, and I don't think it's fair for you guys at all to be put on this right now, and this sort of seems like not the best process to do this type of thing. But anyways, thanks.
Councilor Thorpe, Councilor Yoke, or Mayor McKay, Councilor Hong.
I'm next?
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. So we're told this is the time to suggest changes, adding or deleting. So that being the case to this motion, I will support the motion. I think it's an important role in this day and age that a city government needs. But I'm a little confused about the wrinkle that the mayor's comments have caused. And maybe we need to differentiate between the fact that an individual who held the position was let go, but the position itself stays on the books. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Do we
Chair?
technically still have that position, even though we don't have somebody filling the position?
So to help answer the mayor's question from earlier and Councillor Thorpe's question now, all I can suggest is that, yes, there was a motion made in 2012 to increase the service level and add this position. However, every year in the budget, you can see the slide of positions removed, it comes to council to then make the decision. So the decision to remove this position is being made by council now. It is recommended by staff and was recommended by staff to include this in the budget from provisional. Well, it was at the provisional budget and then some changes from the provisional to the final. But this is council's decision. So council's decision to remove it is now.
So if I may then, my understanding is that we do need to vote to add it back in, if we wish to, the position.
It was removed in the provisional budget, so technically you have already removed the budget, it does not exist in the original budget, provisional budget.
All right. Thank you for that clarification. And if that is the case, then I will support the motion. Thank you.
Mayor McKay.
Thank you. I just want, for point of clarification, I think you turned me off. Oops. Just for a point of clarification, this is a committee that does not bind the decisions of council. Am I correct?
Correct.
Through the chair to Mayor McKay, this committee makes recommendations to council. So the actual council will approve these recommendations brought forward from the committee.
Having said that, if I could follow up, this committee could come with a decision today, next week, and the week after of no decision or no recommendation. And it wouldn't be binding on council. Council makes a decision on April 23rd.
Right. Correct.
I'm correct. Thank you.
Councillor Hong.
Thank you for.
Yes, you should be. You're not?
Am I there now? Oh, there I am. From, like I said, from my perspective of staffing changes, if these had business plans and this is what the staff need to move forward, just because the council feels that we need a communications officer, that's not what staff are telling us, and that's not what is budgeted. And I think there's some other positions in here that I could see that are more important in the time that we need the staff. So I won't support it. I don't think we need to. If council wants to make it for an increase, we can either eliminate one of these positions, but it seems like this is what senior management and they've talked to, and if this hasn't changed from the provisional, it hasn't changed, right, the staffing? These additions have not changed since last time we've discussed.
Thank you.
So staffing changes made between provisional and final include the legislative services clerk was added between provisional and final. A steno in bylaw was added, but that steno position was eliminated for provisional and added back for final because there's actually a person in that position. And the manager of community safety was added between provisional, final, and the manager of bylaw, regulatory, and security was removed between provisional and final. All the other changes you see were incorporated in the provisional budget that you adopted in January.
So from my perspective, then I think staff are happy with these positions that they've added, since if they thought it was a valuable tool to have communications, they would have done so and added that position if they felt necessary to get through this year. Maybe it is a discussion for next year when we have a CAO and CFO to have these discussions for 2019, but in the form of 2018, if this is what staff needs to move forward, I think this is what we should move forward with. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Councillor Brennan and then Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is council's budget. This is where we put our stamp on the organization. So I can't think of a single city our size that doesn't have a communications director. Communications director is very helpful to all of the departments in assisting them in composing their relationship with the community. But a major role is to assist council to get out what it is we want to get out, what the information is we want to get out. It's not a question for staff to determine whether council needs assistance in getting out a message. That's council's decision. And so I think to say, well, you know what, the staff made this budget up for us and we should just be happy and accept their view of our communication needs. That wasn't the case in the past. It's not the case now. It's not the case across the province. And one more time, Nanaimo kind of takes some back steps, moves themselves out of the sort of future. You know, we're happy with the golden days of yesteryear, and we fall behind over and over and over again. We don't have a social planning committee. We don't have a committee to assist us with the environment. We don't have a communications officer.
We're talking about a single position, and we've been talking about it. It's only a motion to go to council. We can debate at the council table.
Wait, hang on.
Could I have a-
I
I
can
would,
debate.
I would uphold the point of order. If we can speak to the specific to
I am
the
going to
motion.
speak to the specific. Thank you very much for correcting me, but I am permitted to debate this here and now.
If we can just
I
speak
hope.
specifically to
Yes,
the
this is
the
what I'm
motion
doing.
of the communications officer
The
position.
communications officer and our need to move forward in this century and not cling to 1950s Nanaimo standards. This is, it's a new world. We need some new ideas to, and new staff to get us there.
Okay. Are you,
Quite,
would you like to add?
nope,
No.
I'm quite finished.
Councillor Armstrong?
I believe the communications director is a critical part. Just about every city has one, even cities smaller than us are using them. They're critical. Just about every agency that's anything of size over 100 has a communications person, so I will be supporting the motion. I think it's very important. I do not recall seeing that position being removed in the last provisional budget, so for that I apologize, because I do not recall seeing that put any place. I could be wrong, but I don't recall that at all. And again, I agree that these are decisions that council needs to make. We take staff's recommendation into account. However, from my perspective, I think the director of communications is critical. Thank you.
Councillor Hong and then Councillor Yocum.
Thank you. And if we're going by cities of our sizes and what we require, I think a lot of cities our sizes actually have a city solicitor, if I'm not mistaken. I think that was one of the business plans. Victoria, I think, had one. Is that correct? So
Stick to the top.
we had that for a city of our size. I think we do are moving it forward. Manager of risk, manager of the treasury and risk. That's something I've never heard of from others, or do other municipalities of our size, question, do the staff have this position? Or is this something new in technology that everybody's gonna eventually have one of these positions? Because that's something I've never heard of before. And what do they do? A manager of treasury and risk. That's a question to the staff.
Because it's so new, I think the idea was that there would be, there was an insurance component, there was a cash component, there was investment component, there was a few different components of the job, but because it is so new, we haven't been involved with a lot of the discussions about what exactly that position would do.
So we are then, in your mind, then cutting edge, because if you don't really know what they do, if you knew what this position was, then every city would have it. So I think that the staff are saying that we're back in the golden days is not true. I think we are moving forward, and staff realizes that we need a manager of treasury and risks for our money and assets going forward. And I think that is innovation. Communication, I honestly, I can tell you that what staff put out now is just as good, if not better, than what was put out before. I don't know what the communications position put it out before. We still have the City of Nanaimo updates that would come out. I guess each department does their own. Those reports are still phenomenal. I don't know the difference between this, what's coming out now, and what came out when we had a communications person. So I commend staff for doing a job well done without a communications person at this point. And I see a value in treasury and risk because we have assets, we have money, we have investments. We can actually make money or better our money and finding ways that we can invest our money for the people. So to say that the staff isn't moving forward into the 21st century, I think is wrong, and I think they are. So for that reason, until we need it for this budget, again, I won't support it. In 2019, if we decide that, this position doesn't work or any other positions because they are obsolete, because we're the golden age and we need to move forward, then we can have that discussion. But until then, I'm happy with the positions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Yocum.
Just quickly, I want to state that I'll be able to support this. I'll be supporting this, but want to ensure though, if the line item changes, well, dive into surplus, I won't be supporting this on April 23rd. So I think there's enough space in that surplus not to check number. If anything, we should be making that number go down. So that's just my position for today. And then my final comment, we are in the 1950s in many areas, especially when it comes to area reconciliation, so it's fun. So anyways, we are definitely there. But anyways, thank you.
Thank you. We have a motion on the floor. I'll call the question. Absolutely. The motion, I may be incorrect here, but is to reinstate the communication officer position for the 2018 budget cycle. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to the rest of the committee, it is to reinstate the position of Director of Communications and bring back the accompanying 2012 staff report with information on the position to council. But yes, reinstate the position of Director of Communications in the 2018 budget.
Thank you. I have Councillor Fuller, Councillor Yocum, and then we'll be calling the question.
Just quickly, if we bring this position back, there is a cost to that, and that cost would have an implication on taxes.
Correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Yocum.
Thank you. So again, the process is not a great process to make votes on or the decisions on knowing exactly what's going to cost. So I will vote in favor just to get the report to the table to see what the costs are, and won't be able to support though if the taxes go up from this position. I think we got to be creative here. Thank you. I will not be supporting this in April.
I have Ms. Fuller.
Just to put some perspective around the cost, assuming we reinstate the position at its previous level, you're looking at wages and benefits of approximately $146,000. Then we'd also have to add budget for telephone, computer, memberships, training and development, and keeping in mind that this wouldn't be $250,000, but $250,000 is 0.25% taxes, because every $1 million is a 1% tax increase. So probably by the time we finish adding the position back, we're going to be looking somewhere between $150,000 and $160,000. So yes, it would go up from the 3.18%.
Thank you. I'll call the question. All in favor? See Councillors Armstrong, Thorpe, Yocum, Brennan, McKay in favor. All opposed? Motion carries. Councillor Besta can be recorded as being opposed. Thank you. Anything else? Are you off, Bill?
This is a follow-up, if I may. So, on the 23rd, we're going to politically have a gun to our head saying the legislation this, legislation that needs this done. So if we can meet before then, because if I heard there's 2.2 million plus in surplus, so just because I voted in favor of this today, if that minimally, I hope that 3%, whatever it is today, goes down a bit, I will be voting opposed to this, just because I voted yes now. If it does not move, I will be voting no. It's just so we're crystal clear. Thank you.
I have Mayor McKay and then Councillor Fuller. And are we discussing or are we making motions now?
Making a motion.
Thank you.
I'd like to move a motion that we remove the manager of Treasury and Risk from the budget. The position and the funding.
I have a motion before us to remove the position of Manager, Treasury and Risk, moved by Mayor McKay and seconded by Councillor Brennan. Discussion? So I'm, okay.
I put mine on to discuss this.
I have Ms. Gurry, I have staff left one. Oh, Ms. Gurry's gone, staff left one. You're gone?
No, I just wanted to make the point that if you do use current year surplus to fund anything for the 2018 budget, it will increase the 2019 budget because we would not be able to use the reserve. It's a one-time funding source.
Thank you. Then I go to Councillor Kipp, Councillor Brennan, Councillor Armstrong, Councillor Hong.
Risk management's hugely important in this day and age, especially with the concerns I've talked about with, like we say, where we don't have an actual budget process policy, we don't have things like that. So when I see treasury and risk, and we've had risk managers, Linda Murray was a risk manager, Peter, Peter, I can't even think, what's that? Peter Whipper, yeah, he was a risk manager, and I don't know if we have a risk manager, and that position got eliminated, or what happened to it, but risk, financial risk right now is huge, especially when you hear the treasury position of watching investments and dealing with investments and how our social order corporation can invest. So I vote, anytime I see the word risk, I can support it. Thank you.
Did you want to have a risk buyer and a risk, no, just kidding.
Chair?
And I have to go.
Councillor Brennan.
This position has never been fully explained to us. I understand that it's new, so it's hard to say, which makes me think that's kind of risky if you don't know what you're hiring somebody to do, or you don't know what your expectation is. Maybe you could help me with that?
It was the vision of the CFO. So he had specific ideas about what that role was. I personally have not had discussions with him on that role as it is today. I'm not sure if Wendy has.
We have.
Wendy can pull up the business case to go into what the position was first.
Okay, so you know what, I just can't, I am supporting the motion to remove this because our staff isn't completely apprised of it. It's not something I've seen in our budgets before or posed. I know we're getting a business case now, but it's like 11th hour and we haven't seen it, and even our staff aren't sure. I think this needs to be removed and some time spent, going over it for, say, the 2019 year. But this is not the way we usually do things, where our when you ask a staff member, and I'm not critical of you, critical of how this occurred, well, what is this position, and have our staff have to respond. We're not entirely conversant with it. So I want you guys to know what it is thoroughly so that you can explain it to me. So I'm actually quite surprised at this. Did we hire somebody? Is this one of those positions we hired somebody and put them in? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I have Councillor Armstrong. And just a comment. And I mentioned it before 20 minutes ago. It's not uncommon for positions to be included that we aren't aware of and haven't been aware of over the decades that arrive. And we have a senior leadership team of 7 that we've been informed are making the decisions on bringing this information to us. And so when we're advocating for there's always 2 arguments. There might even be 3 in most situations. But if we don't know enough, we don't want it. But if we don't know enough, we do want it. Or if we want it but don't know enough, then we want it. So this is the information that staff brought to us. And this is our opportunity to provide input. And it's extremely unfortunate that we find ourselves here on April the 4th having to make these decisions without information. And then we're going to send staff back to start amending and adjusting from 3.18. So point ones make a difference to everything that we do because it compounds. It's such a compounding expense. And
do I still have the floor?
You're more than welcome to respond.
Okay, thank you. Because Sure, we've had positions that we've had to ask our staff in the past, "Well, what is this?" But in every instance, they've come back and told me. I mean, there have not been staff sent into this situation without being given the background to be able to answer the question, what is this position about?
All right, thank you very
This-
much. Move on, Councillor Armstrong.
Yeah, just for clarification purposes for myself, we've heard that the senior management team has gone through all of this and agrees with that. Is that an accurate statement?
What would be accurate would be to say that the senior management team reviewed the business cases. They made the cases for the business cases for their areas, and the CAO and the CFO made the decision on what business cases were going to be included in the financial plan, and they discussed those decisions with directors. But the
So-
final decision was the CAO and the CFO.
So who did the business case for the manager of Treasury and Risk?
That came from the finance department. I did assist with all the business cases that were developed, but I was involved with 16 of them, so I just went back to refresh my memory. So the manager, because I just assist with them, they're not my ideas, the business cases. The manager of Treasury and Risk Management, it basically had 4 bullet points on its duties, was risk management coordination, so it would be involved in education, training, and developing risk management practices. It was going to take over the property and liability insurance function. It was going to do the treasury function, which would including making sitting investments, also watching our cash flow and making sure that we invest cash that's not needed, so we're getting the greatest return. And it would also oversee the accounts payable function that currently falls under accounting services.
Makes sense.
Thank you. Again, I come back to the point, this is the first time I've seen this, unless, and I remember reading all that, the previous stuff, and did not see this on the previous provincial budget, provisional budget.
One, we did not present the provisional budget, and also I was not at the in-camera meeting, so I don't know what was
First I've heard of it.
presented at the in-camera meetings and what wasn't presented at the in-camera meetings.
Did you hear this before? Or is it just, you know, it's like, for me, it's very difficult to make a decision last minute when I'm just hearing about new positions. Thank you.
Councillor Hong.
Thank you. So back to the provisional budget and what we did in camera. Because this is one of the L's and requires negotiation per se with sometimes QP, because the Parks and Recreation Facilities Project Technician Specialist, is that an exempt position?
No, that is a QP position.
So we've discussed that position in the provisional budget?
That budget was in the provisional budget that council adopted, correct?
So Councillor Armstrong is shaking her head on. Well, no, that project technician specialist. If these haven't changed and the only thing that staff have said, which ones were added?
The ones added since the changes to staffing from provisional to final were the legislative services clerk, the steno and bylaw, which I mentioned was removed for provisional and added back for final, because there was actually an employee in the position. The manager of community safety was added for final, and the manager of bylaw, regulatory, and security was removed for final. So yes, the manager of treasury position, the city solicitor, and the project technician specialist were all in the provisional budget that you adopted. Why, if it was disclosed to you in in-camera meetings, I can't comment because
Yeah.
I wasn't there. Why it was not disclosed when provisional budget, I did not do that presentation or that report, so I can't comment on why that disclosure was not made.
And this made sense that we did this stuff in camera first because of the fact that there were jobs and everything else related to that, especially adding positions for QP, because I'm assuming that one is a QP position and lead services clerk was. And there are new QP positions, right? There are new QP positions?
The legislative services clerk and the project technician specialist are new QP.
So we would have done that in camera because it's an L.
I don't remember.
I don't remember that.
So,
We didn't talk that.
okay, great, thank you.
All right, so we have Ms. Gurry, please. And We are rapidly closing in on noon, and I will be departing at noon. Not that the meeting will end, but I'm departing at noon. Ms. Guri, did you have anything?
That's okay, Chair. No, I can follow up after.
Councillor Hong, are you finished?
Yes.
Question?
Would anybody like to have the motion read before the question is called? I would, please.
That the Finance and Audit Committee recommend to council to remove the manager of Treasury and Risk position from funding for the 2018 budget.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. To call the question, all in favor? See Councillor McKay, or sorry, Mayor McKay, Councillor Brennan, and Armstrong in favor. The motion is defeated.
Well, opposed.
Well, opposed. The motion is defeated. Anything else for anybody?
Me.
Councillor Fuller is on.
Okay, my turn. One question and the potential of 3 motions. The question, the $500,000 increase primarily comes from the health, safety, and security, does it not? Which increases the taxes.
Yeah.
The changes from provisional, the 2 biggest drivers there are the response to health, social, and safety issues, and the changes to wages and benefits.
Okay, so I would like, and we've done this before, and I don't know whether I need a motion now or whether you could come back with this on the 23rd, but I would like to know options that we could use from reserves to pay down the health, safety, and social portion. I don't know if we can do anything about wages, but that one's important, but I don't see the need for it to increase taxes because I believe the money is there. We could always allocate it from the 2017 surplus if needed. So that would be one change I would like, and I don't know whether I should make a motion to do that or if that can be brought back to us on the 23rd. Okay, so I would like to make a motion with regards to which reserves could be used to cover the social safety and health costs, as well as the possibility of allocating 2017 as well as the option of allocating from the 2017 surplus. That's what I would
So
like.
there's 2 motions, and there's 2.
Is it?
I think you have 2 subjects inside that one statement, but.
I think it's 1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Chair, before we move on, if we could just get some clarification from Ms. Mercer over there, because my understanding is that you want to reduce or eliminate the increase to the final budget by using reserves and/or surplus, 2017 surplus. So wherever the money can come from, but to eliminate the costs for that. So if we could get a reserve name or an appropriate place, finance staff could let us know the correct details to that motion. Is that okay, Laura?
Yep, that would be the better motion.
Really, the only real place that we could fund that from would be from the surplus from 2017.
And I get the fact that those costs might have to move towards 2019, et cetera, but I think we could deal with that in 2019 when we know what the surpluses are from 2018. Seems we always have the surpluses.
So what I understand the motion to be is to direct staff to utilize surplus from 2017 for items, I'm just going to say, capital project management framework, community engagement task force, response to health, social wellness, wages and benefits. Is that, and I don't suspect that I'm right, but I think in order to give accurate direction, needs to be more specific.
Chair, I believe it was just the response to health and social safety issues. Is that correct?
Yeah, and to come back with the means to
Right, so the motion would be for the Finance and Audit Committee to recommend to council to use the 2017 surplus to eliminate the response to health and safety issues.
reserves.
Or other reserves, right,
I
but,
believe there are reserves we could use, so they would come back with that.
Okay, is everybody familiar with the recommendation or
That's
the motion?
motion number one.
Any more discussion? I have Councillor Brennan.
Thank you. I think it's generally recognized that you don't want to provide a service with surplus because, like a surplus, you might want to do a project that has a beginning and an end. But this, I think, is not going to have a beginning and an end in 2018. I think that this is a service that we have told our community and our downtown in particular that we're going to tackle this. This is how we're going to do it. We have a budget line of 336.9 year after year, I think, and this is just precarious. It's not a continuous funding, and we should not be making those kinds of promises based on using last year's surpluses. This is a commitment we should be making in our budget. I can't support ever doing something like that.
Thank you. Councillor Armstrong.
I concur with Councillor Brennan. I do think there should be a line item in the budget. I don't think that social issues are going to go downhill. I think they're going to go up, and I think we need to be prepared for them and not rely on surpluses to try and get us out of a hole if it does happen. So I would like to see it as a line object as well and keep it there and not, and fund it properly. Thank you.
Councillor Fuller.
We just made a motion to approve a communications officer that would have covered this. So making a motion on the fly to increase costs, making a motion on the fly to decrease costs is immaterial here. As I say, it's the surplus or other reserves. We have used general reserves in the past for these types of items. We have used the housing legacy reserve. So this is about more than just the surplus. And I totally agree, at some point we need to figure out the actual costs, because these are were just brought to us a few weeks ago, these costs. And those costs may rise as social issues rise.
I have staff left too.
Just to comment on reserves, for the response to health, social, and safety issues, the items that were applicable to the Housing Legacy Reserve were funded from the Housing Legacy Reserve. The other items don't meet the criteria of the Housing Legacy Reserve. If we were to look at reserves, pretty well the only one that potentially you could use would be general capital, but you generally save your general capital reserve for infrastructure. You don't usually use it for operating costs.
Thank you for that. I have Councillor Brennan and this will be the last, and then we're going to call the question.
Okay. This response that we created isn't seen by the community as a simple one-off, that they see this as a continuing support for people who are homeless, who require assistance, for people who have drug addictions. So, you know, in my view, $336,000 is kind of a drop in the bucket. But when you tell them this is a one-time budget that we were able to scrape together from our surplus from the year before, I don't think anybody's going to trust anything. They will not trust that. We need to make a commitment. If that's what we wanted to tell people that day, then that's what we should follow through on. Now to put the P under the other cup and say, no, just for the balance of this year, it's not going to work. It's going to just make people more cynical about the operations of our council, and in particular, our response to people who are living in abject poverty and abject misery.
Thank you. Hung, Counselor Hong, and then Counselor Fuller.
Thank you. I seem to see this in both ways, and I tend to agree that I don't think this problem is going to go away. I see that we're going to probably have to increase. Yeah, I won't be surprised if this actually hits $500,000 in the next coming years, or even $1 million in the next coming years. But what staff did with the MSP to offset that increase was to put some surplus aside to buffer this. So I don't think we should have used surplus for MSP for the provincial government's issues. That's not fair to the people. That makes no sense to me. But I understand why staff did it, is so that spike doesn't spike. So one way or the other, either this one passes or fails, it doesn't matter, because I'm still going to bring that 3.19 or 3.18 down, because I'm not happy with that number. And exactly what staff said we did with the other stuff. My motion before I left was moving $250,000 out of the RCMP contract, $250,000 out of the Strategic Infrastructure Reserve. We have, if we're talking about projects and capital revenues, we have our council reserve for projects. That's why we set that aside. So, and I understand what staff is trying to do, and I understand what Councillor Fuller is going to do, and I agree that I don't think this number is going to go away. But we're going to have to buffer this number somehow, because it's going to get really ugly really fast.
To get the province to pay for the social.
So, and the more that we seem to throw at this, what I'm going to see from the provincial government is like, hey, look, they kicked in $1 million for this. Let's let them keep doing it. They don't need our help. They have money. So I think when we look at issues that aren't our issues, and we need a helping hand, being skimpy on that number looks good, because it looks like we need help. For us to pad it up to a really high number, it doesn't look like we need help. And I agree that that number right now should be doubled. I don't think our taxpayers can afford it. I think we need help, and it's exactly what the $100,000 that we put towards drop-in center from this. It's not going to do anything. We need a lot more money, but I think it was our contribution to let other agencies know that we're serious and we're stepping up to the plate, and I think that's what this money should be for. So I can't support not trying to get that number as low as possible, because other levels of government should be helping us. So that's just my thought on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hong. I have Councillor Fuller, and then I said I was going to call the question, and I will stick with calling the question. Councillor Fuller?
Yeah, just no one is saying the costs aren't going to increase. If anybody knows they're going to increase, it's me. I've dealt with the deaths from some of the crap that's going on there right now, and I continue to deal with them. There was an overdose at one of the previous places of my employment the other day where I was laid off. So that stuff is going to continue. Housing is a primary objective. I asked, and part of this was that we asked the province to fund the extreme weather shelter throughout the year at the same times. Don't know where that one's at now. To call $350,000 peanuts and then use abject poverty in the same sentence, to me is ludicrous and shameful. Tell that to every person on income assistance who makes $7,000 a year and has to live on that.
So the motion that has been moved and seconded, Ms. Gurry, would you just read it for us, and then I'll call the question.
Thank you, Chair. The recommendation is that the Finance and Audit Committee recommend that Council use monies from appropriate reserves and/or 2017 surplus to reduce or eliminate the costs associated with response to health, social, and safety issues.
Thank you. Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? See Mayors McKay, Councillor Brennan, Councillor Yocum, Councillor Thorpe, and Councillor Armstrong. Opposed. Motion fails. I did state that I have to leave at noon. I have another place to be. Is there any other business before?
You have to move their report through?
No, we already did. I was told we didn't need a motion to do that.
Chair, just to correct the record, you said the motion, it was defeated. I think you said it was carried.
No, I said fails.
Oh, fails. Okay, thank you.
That's okay.
Thanks.
If there's any other business, before people leave, I understand, to maintain a quorum, but, so I had, Counselor Hong, that was the last one?
Well, no, I wanted to make the motion to move that contract. I don't know if that got through or not.
I'm sorry?
I didn't make that motion yet, so I'm going to make that motion now.
The motion
To reduce the RCMP contract,
from 93% to 92%?
1 million to 750,000. I won't use percentages. I just,
Oh, I'm sorry.
better? Okay,
So do you please repeat the motion?
sure. I would like to, so it's a two-part motion that we reduce the RCMP contract from 93% to 92%, and the difference of 1% is to be used from the 2017 surplus to put into the RCMP reserve. So all I'm doing is moving money from 2017 surplus into the RCMP reserve in case it exceeds 92%, there is money from reserve.
Understood.
Does that make sense to staff?
So just to clarify, you would like us to change, your motion will be to change the budget estimate from 93% to 92%, and the difference, whatever that dollar figure works out to, which I believe is about 250K, but we'll have to do the exact calculation. You would like that allocated from surplus to our RCMP reserve?
Yes.
Okay.
So that's just, it's not a change in services, it's a buffer. Like I said, if we were accurate on 92%, let's keep it at 92%. And if we need money, we have that reserve from surplus, because I thought that's what surpluses are for, to move it back into a reserve, and this is going into a reserve. So that's my motion.
Seconded by Councillor Armstrong. Any discussion? Call the question. Oh, sorry. Councillor Brennan.
Thank you. Could I ask staff what the impact of that would be on our budget going forward? Is there a negative impact on the services that we'll be providing?
Yeah, oh, sorry. Next year, you wouldn't, if you didn't take surplus again, if you ran into problems, you could.
Are you asking for the change for all 5 years of the plan, or just 2018?
Just 2018, and go forward next year to see where
Okay,
we're
so
at.
then you would see then we will see the 2019 property tax number go up when we bring it back to you, because we only use surplus for 1 year. So that 250,000 is going to be another 0.25%, so you're going to be bumping up to 2019.
That's only, we don't have surplus.
But for the property tax bylaw you would be passing, it will show a higher number for 2019 for property tax.
We could be here. That's true, but we could be here doing the same thing again next year. Surplus can be carried over.
I believe it's because 2018 is for 2018 isn't known if it exists at this time.
We need to raise additional taxes for 2019, so your 2019 property tax number will go up if that changes for 2018.
Councillor Brennan.
No, so in that instance, I won't support this.
Call the question. All in favor? See Councillor Hong, Yocum, Fuller, Kip, Bestwick in favor? Opposed? Mayor McKay, Councillor Brennan, Councillor Thorpe, Councillor Armstrong, the motion carries. Any other business? Mayor McKay.
Thank you. I would like to move a motion that we cap legal expense budget to $500K.
Move.
Not to cause any trouble?
Budget's less than 500,000.
It's 480.
I'm not asking what the budget item is, I'm asking that we put a motion forward that we cap it at 500,000. There was wholly hell to pay when we had an increase with respect to our automated waste system. Our budget this year, based on previous years, or pardon, our actuals this year, based on previous years, is almost $500,000 over budget. I tried to bring a motion forward when we were making a decision to hire legal firms to cap it at 500. I'd like to reiterate that, cap it at 500. And the only way that it can go over 500 is if it comes back to council for approval.
I have council. Okay, I'm leaving in 60 seconds. I have Councillor Hong, Councillor Brennan, Councillor Yocum.
I don't really have a problem with that, but I think that and especially if that solicitor is going to come in, but what I do have a problem is if we have issues that are going to be arising and we have 1 month before our next council meeting, or the time it takes to get this through, our staff going to be able to do it, especially in real estate transactions and in all these other things that happen that staff do that we don't know about. So if you're going to cap somebody's cap, I like to know who you're capping, not an overall cap, because I think there are certain areas, if we're over, for staff to come back to saying, and yeah, I need $1,500 because we're over a $500,000 limit to complete a real estate transaction or to sign these documents, or I need $500 for a notary. I think this is ill thought out. I think we can come up with this discussion anytime. I don't think this affects the budget at this point. So if we were to bring this up next month, we can have a fulsome discussion and get a staff report, but at this point, it doesn't seem to make any sense to be making these on the fly. Like, it doesn't seem to make any sense to me when it doesn't affect the budget, and we're here to talk about the budget at this point. So that's why I won't support this.
Thank you, Councillor Brennan.
I will support it. I think that the example we saw in the last year and a half says to us that we need to have council far more involved in monitoring expenses. Particularly, I think legal was the one that really stood out this year. And this puts a monitoring device in place for us. And I'm really in favor of that, because I think that what happened this past year was not something I'd ever seen, not since 2002. Never seen anything like that.
Councillor Yocum.
Just quickly, I have no issue capping this for the simple fact, though, I don't need the political posturing on Mr. Mayor why it's so high. I look for the reports on why lawyers are used. I like a breakdown from day one on why lawyers are used. And I recall going in camera one meeting, you said, I will not speak unless I have a lawyer here. So I look forward to we got more time on that this debate. I got no issue, but the people in camera know why there were so many lawyers involved. I can't wait for the public to know, and we can share that. So the political posturing about lawyer expenses just right now is just all political posturing, but I totally support that. But we know why there was such legal, which I can't permit here because of legalities on why. No, it's not. I'm telling the facts. Did he not once say in there?
This
So-
is just, if we could maintain, when you
So,
have the
we all know
floor,
We know why. I have no
please
issue.
do not interrupt the person that has the floor, just like we would ask the audience. Please
Anyways,
don't interrupt.
I got my
and
point
interfere.
across. I look forward to, from day one, getting why we had our lawyers on everything, and unfortunately, it wasn't for city business, it's for, again, I said 2 hours ago, nonsense at this table.
If we could just refrain from our secondary comments, and I'll try to allow everybody to speak so that doesn't create more toxic discussions and distractions.
Motion to adjourn?
Mayor McKay.
Has my motion been seconded? Thank you.
Councillor Armstrong.
I was just going to make a motion to defer this to the April 11th meeting when we have time to discuss it.
Second to deferral.
On a deferral, do we need, it's just, there's no, just just call the question. The motion to defer,
Bring to next committee?
we can defer it to the next committee if we choose to, yes,
It's on April 11th.
which is fine. There's no debate or discussion on a deferral. Motion to defer to April 11th, is that the, Ms. Gurry?
You don't need a date in which to refer it to. You could just refer it and staff could bring it back when it was ready, if that was
Thank you,
okay.
thank you.
Is it too
On the
hot
mo-
here?
We have a deferral to vote on. Motion to defer. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. As a chair, it's my point of privilege, and we had a motion on the floor to, and we had a deferral motion, yes.
Privilege
Well, we
is
stopped.
about
Motion,
temperature.
could somebody please, motion
Privilege
to
is
adjourn?
about temperature and stuff.
Motion adjourned.
You pretend
There's only one
well
person here that
when
knows the
you
rules,
pretend well.
apparently.
You with the balls.